צומא לכל נפשי, קומא לכל בשורי, בארץ ציון ויהיה בני מויי.
בכל מה. a Mazel Tov. Das soll jeder Kuppel mais im Tee. Die geben mir noch mehr nicht zu schlafen. Varia. Vechom. Adove beite, shive de nechem. Was wir sagen, die sind Charov Wege, die sind Dvar Hashem. Kein Gebrauch. Kein Gebrauch. Das von mir sagen, sei Nieden mit der Simche. Kein Gebrauch.
verstanden, die singen noch Deres für Munna.
Gimmel Tammuz. Gimmel Tammuz is a mysterious day, to put it mildly. It's a day of paradox. On one hand, 26 years ago, on a dark Motzei Shabbos, Saturday night, a powerful, powerful force ceased to function on this domain, in this dimension. Or at least that's what it appeared like. Hashem, in his own way, decided to take the Rebbe from this physical domain, and a new stage began. On the other hand, we are told, Nisi Yisrael lo yaziv tzein marisam. Jewish leaders do never forsake their flock. Mala halon hu emedu mishamish, afkanu emedu mishamish. Just as then he stood upright and served, so too now he stands upright and serves. Divri tzadikim kayomim la'ad. The words of tzadikim, their lives, their legacies live on forever. Gam, in the opposite of life, they're called kruyim chayim. You look in Ageres HaKedesh, Simon Chov Zayin, the Alter Rebbe explains, since the tzaddik's life is chaim ruchnim, spiritual life, emunah, ava and yira, faith, love and awe, while he was a soul in a body, that is his primary life, that is his life, chaim ruchnim, that never stops, that continues. And on the contrary, it's now even more powerful than before, because it's not confined in a body. So here we have the paradox of Gimmel Tammuz. On one hand, such sadness and darkness. On the other hand, we are told it lives on and in stronger ways. How are we to make sense of this? And how do we translate it into our lives? It's one thing to talk about it. How do we translate? And the mystery gets deeper. It gets deeper. The Rebbe told us clearly in Tovshin Yud Aleph, in the first Maimer, Bosiligani, that this is the Der Hashvi'i. Betulda. Not because we worked at it, and not because we earned it, not because we wanted it. In some ways, the Rebbe said, we may not have wanted it. But that's Betulda, meaning seventh from the Alter Rebbe. Der Hashvi'i. Like the Moshe Rabbeinu from Avram Avinu, the mission of the seventh generation is to bring the Shekhinah down below. As Moshe built V'shachanti b'seichem, v'osel l'migdash v'shachanti b'seichem in his time, our job is to finish the job, and finish the process, and bring the Shekhinah dira b'tachtenim. This will be the last generation in Golus, the first generation of Geula, and we will be redeemed in this time. Clear. No one can argue about those words. And the entire so-called plan of the Rebbe's through the years. All the different mivtzoyim and the different shlichus and the whole concept of shlichus and everything was geared toward that end, to finish the job, to finish the process that began in the beginning of history, and we're now coming to, and was intensified with the Gili of Chassidus. Mashiach told the Baal Shem Tov, "Emasai kosimar, when will you come? L'kashiyafutza meinesecha chutza," the spreading of the meinesecha, the wellsprings of Chassidus, chutza outward, to the point of chutza she'ein chutza mimena, as the Rebbe emphasizes, to the furthest outskirts. And that is the mission, to continue that until we finish the last step of it. And then the Rebbe made it clear we're at the threshold. All we have to do is zuputs in the kneplach, is to polish the buttons, and then we finish that too, the Rebbe said. Beis Nisan Tov Shemem Ches, and much more in intense ways, in urgent ways, Tov Shinun and on. And yet, suddenly a Gimmel Tammuz, out of the blue. It was not part of the plan. It was not part of the discussion. It wasn't hinted to. In retrospect, people can find whatever they want to find. But no, that was not the plan. The plan was we're going straight into Chaim Nitzchim, as the Rebbe said time and again. And then suddenly we're thrust with a Gimmel Tammuz, which was preceded by a Chav Zayin Oder, a little more than 2 years earlier, where the Rebbe had the stroke. How does that fit? How is it consistent? And this has left every chassid, every person perplexed. Yet again, the paradox. Because the Rebbe's mission, God forbid, doesn't change. The Hashvi'i, Mashiach is going to come. And yet we're here 26 years later from Gimmel Tammuz, 28 years later from Chav Zayin Oder. So how do we make sense of this? And what, above all, even if we can't make sense, what are we supposed to do? How do you mix these paradoxes? How do you implement them? How do you act? What does Gimmel Tammuz demand of us? And obviously not just to talk about it. It has to come into real action. The Rebbe has always taught us that Teira Meloshen Hira, the most repeated statement from the Rebbe in all the Farbrengens, Teira is Meloshen Hira. Teira gives us directive. It's a guidebook. It's the blueprint for life. Everything in life. And therefore we have to look to Teira to find answers. People can come up with hergeshim, this one has this feeling, this has the chassidische hergesh. It may be based on something, it may be based on your own genes, may be based on what you picked up in Girse de Yankese, as you were a young man or young woman. But there's a Teira that's also a reality check. Teira is Teira Semes, is the Ebershter's Teira. So how do we find in Teira an answer to this? So I suggest, let's look at an event that happened on Gimmel Tammuz and has striking parallels to our Gimmel Tammuz. And this event happened 3,293 years ago. Yeah, it's a long time. Zman Yeshua. In the book of Yeshua, Kapitel Yud talks about the Eden going into Eretz Yisrael and the battles they fought. Seder Elim Rabbah, there's a medrash, says that something happened on Gimmel Tammuz that's referred to in that chapter. Shemesh begiven Daim. Yeshua, in fighting the battle, prayed to God and asked God and said, Shemesh begiven, the Shemesh in the city of Given, Doim. Doim literally means to be silent, as Rashi explains, because when the sun is silent, the sun also stops. The reason the sun orbits in the sky, the orbit is part of its song. It's bowing and singing praise. So Yeshua wanted the sun to stop so he can continue the battle and before night falls. And the Eibishter granted that, and the sun stopped. A miracle. The Pasuk says it was such an extraordinary event that it says, V'lo yehoya kayemahu, lefonov v'acharov, l'shmoya Hashem b'koil ish, ki Hashem nilcham liYisrael. There was not such a day before and after Never was there such another day that Hashem listened to the voice, a day that Hashem listened to the voice of man, to Yeshua, because Hashem was battling for the Jewish people. You don't find this common, that it says never. Yetzias Mitzrayim was not a unique, extraordinary, unprecedented day. Kriyas Yamsuf, Matan Torah. And yet here the Pasuk chooses to say there was never a day like this, not before and not after. It's also a paradoxical day. Why? Because either or. If Hashem is fighting for them, you have to have the sun to stop. The sun can continue and Hashem will help them miraculously to win. And think about the analysis of the sun stopping. What does that mean exactly? The sun stopping is a good thing or not a good thing? On one hand, it's good. Yes, the sun is shining, so it remains day. But the sun stopping means the sun is stopping to sing praise to God. Shira and Zimra LaHashem. Is that a positive? How are we to look at this? Well, 93 years ago, there's another Gimmel Tammuz. The year is Tofresh Pei Zayin. The year Tofresh Pei Zayin, the Frierdiker Rebbe was arrested, as we know, on Tezvov Sivan. And with all the different interventions and miracles, ultimately his sentence from death was commuted on Gimmel Tammuz to exile, to Golus. And then that was changed as well, and at Yud Beis, Yud Gimmel Tammuz, the Frierdiker Rebbe was completely freed. The Rebbe refers to Gimmel Tammuz as Aschalta de Geula. Because at the time, exile was better than death, obviously, Rachmana litzlan. But it was still far from an ideal situation. But it ended up being the beginning of a process that would ultimately free him completely. So Chalta de Gul. So at the time, Gimmel Tammuz was again a paradox. Is it a day we should celebrate? Chassidim asked. Is it a day of good day? Is it not such a good day? Is it in between? Now, in retrospect, it was a day that actually began the Geula, because that ultimately led to the complete Geula, Yud Beis, Yud Gimmel Tammuz. So we have a day here, Gimmel Tammuz, and now, what happened 26 years ago leaves us with this big question. Is it a day that's going to be the beginning of Eschalta de Geula? It hasn't happened yet. Is it a day of silence of the sun? Is it a day of beginning of great things? How are we to take this? Well, in every generation we have a Moshe Rabbeinu. It's Pashtusa de Moshe b'chol dora v'dora. That's what it says in Zetchonei Zeyar, the Gemara. The Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya that each person has a Moshe within each person, but there's the Moshe of each generation, and that's the Rebbe of the generation, is a Moshe. Moshe is compared to Pnei Moshe ke Pnei Chama. The face of Moshe is compared to the face of the sun. So when you look at the sun, you can learn things from the sun about Moshe. And what happened Gimmel Tammuz 26 years ago? Shemesh, be given name, the sun was stopped and silenced in a different way. The shining, the begili, Einei Basar Shalonu, I'm qualifying, that we should see the sunlight and the brightness of the Pnei Chama b'derenu, shal derenu, Moshe. Gimmel Tammuz did not allow us to see it, at least for most of us. Noshem Kerkenu, people like ourselves. In truth, the silence began, as I said, 2.5 years earlier, Chav Zayin Adar. But it's part of the process, part of one process. So the Shemesh Kipshute of our generation, Daim, was quiet. And yet we see that in this time of Yeshua, it was something about it that served the people well. Yet another paradox. A number of years ago, I think it was around 6-7 years ago, I was looking online. At the time, new ksavim, manuscripts of the Rabbeim were being discovered in the library in Moscow. The library that Rebbe wanted and fought for should be moved to Gudis Chidei Chabad, the true owners. But they digitalized the library there, all those new manuscripts, including a new manuscript from the Mittler Rebbe. I saw it, I was like shocked. It's a mimer from the Alter Rebbe from Tov Kuf Samach Ches. A mimer from Va'era, Tov Kuf Samach Ches. And till this, we've discovered this manuscript, we had the beginning of that mimer from the Tzemach Tzedek and Eira Teira Va'era. And here we have the conclusion from the Mittler Rebbe. And what is he talking about? It was just a few days, maybe a week or before Gimmel Tammuz, talking mamish about this subject matter. So we all know what it says in the Geras HaKedesh Siman Chav Zayin, the beard. What does he say there at the end? He says at the end, he says that the tzaddik, even after his istalkus, continues to radiate and shine. Even though it's concealed for most of his talmidim, but it's still shining and affects his talmidim in many different ways. In Avedis Hashem, he goes on. And then he concludes at the end, he says, like the sun continues to shine, even when the sun sets, the sun doesn't get extinguished, God forbid. It's just not shining on that part of the world, on that part of the globe, but it's shining in another part of the globe. And even the part of the globe where it's night, the stars are gaining the light, they're reflecting the light of the sun. These are the Shishim Riboy, the 600,000 stars that represent the 600,000 Neshamas, Klolis, which of course encompass all others, as the Alter Rebbe explains in Perek Lamed Zayin and Tanya. The Mittler Rebbe develops this further. In that Maimer Va'era, Tovkov Samach Ches, the Mittler Rebbe writes, continuing what the Tzemach Tzedek already published, what we have published in Eira Teira from the Tzemach Tzedek, which is actually from the Mittler Rebbe, I believe, as well. But we didn't have the end of the Maimer. The Moshe Rabbeinu is a mamutza. I'll just read a few lines from there. It says like this. B'chinas Meisha Madrega Kavoyin Shebechol Elim Ve'elim Hu Dahainu Shu Bechol Elim Ve'elim B'chinas HaMamshich Me'elim HaElamayla Me'elim HaElyon Himenu Shezem Meida Tevis Meisha Loshen Moshe Min Amayim Mishisu. Meisha is the Mamutza HaMachaber. He's the interface between higher and lower, between the divine and the people in this world. He goes on to elaborate. He says, and this we understand why it says that Razal say Meisha loy mes, because this memutza is a permanent one. It's not only when he's physically here. This is the role that he plays forever, eternally. Shushbina de Malka. That's as much as we have in Eira Teira. It's the Mittler Rebbe that we found. He says, "Lefisha sharshe b'chinas hamamutza hamamshich me'elin yatachten, sahari behechrech sheyeiru sheyoyer eirei tomid mipaneha." I think maybe meprimis. Amekablim shetzrichim tomid lekabel al yodem me'elim me'elyon. Being that he's this mamutza, eternal mamutza, so he always continues to shine. To the recipients are always in need. They always need this connection. And this is what it means, this pashtusha, demesha b'chol dara v'dara. Behechrech. We must say it's there. Ach mashanemer, then he goes on, but it says vayigva vayesef. We find references to Mesha as passing. She says, asifa zu ene b'chinas asifa v'istalkus l'gamni chaz v'shalom. You can't say it's a complete removal, God forbid. It's like the concealment of the sun that is not radiating right now in this part of the land by night. But it continues to radiate, he says, in another part of the world. It's the sun continues to shine. It's only the makablim in this part that don't see it. It radiates at night like by day. But it changes it changes the way it radiates. By day, the sun shines directly where it's shining, and by night, that oir is concealed, and it's meir ba'oris derechem tsoyes hayereach va'kechovim shemekablim er hashemesh umehen meir er ba'oritz. By night, it still radiates. First of all, in its own area, and secondly, through the Like he says, through the moon and the stars, it's radiating. What are they reflecting? The sunlight. Everything is coming from the sun. As he explains further. That what it says, Vayesaf, Asif Zu, that his Eireh should shine Yisrael through Kippnei Levana, through Yeshua, like a moon. But you cannot say that Moshe is not there. Because he's a Mamutza Hadela Umashke Betmidius, which means he's constantly pouring and constantly transmitting. And this is what Moshe means, Moshe Lemes, B'chinas Misa, B'chinas Istalkos, Elegan Me'elim. It's impossible to say by Moshe, like this sun that continues to shine. So the sun that stopped on Gimmel Tammuz, it's very clear. It didn't stop. It didn't stop shining. It continues to shine. However, it shines now through its Talmidim. Through each of us are the sun's stars. We are the stars of the Rebbe. The stars spread all over the heavens and on earth, shining the Rebbe's light. So Gimmel Tammuz is the paradox. The sun on one hand has set, but on the other hand does not cease to shine, and in many ways even stronger than before. But the question still begs, why? Who needed all of this? Couldn't it just been continuing where we were and go straight to the Geula? So I am not going to suggest that I have answers to this big question. To me, Gimmel Tammuz is a question, not an answer. The mystery, the paradox. Why? It reminds me of the answer that Rebbe gave to someone in Tafshin Yud when they were pushing and insisting that Rebbe assume leadership. So someone wrote to the Rebbe, if the Rebbe doesn't accept leadership, was wird sein? What's going to be with us? The Rebbe answers, this is not one of the answers you hear constantly being publicized, but it's a powerful, powerful answer. I live with this answer. The Rebbe says, you're asking me what's going to be? Was wird sein? There are bigger things I don't know what will be. We have a great Rebbe, and the Rebbe wird versorgen, the Rebbe he'll take care of everything. We don't need an answer to know what we have to do. It's true, intelligent people understand things, especially Chabad. But the smartest person, Tachlis Hayadiyah Shalei Neda, knows there's some things that are beyond the mind. And that's also an intelligent response. Talk about Vayidem. There was another Vayidem. Shemesh begiven Doim. Vayidem Aaron. That Aaron was silent when he lost his two sons. Of course there's deeper kavanas, and they, as the Rebbe said a number of times, Moshe and Aaron knew enough chassidus, they knew Primis Atera to find explanations, but Vayidem, some things are silence. We don't have answers. So I'm not going to suggest and start pontificating and suggesting answers for this big Gimmel Tammuz question. It's like we don't have an answer for the Holocaust. We don't have an answer for the Tzimtzum Arishon. You think the Eibishter couldn't have done it differently? In Eira Teira Maseh, he talks about the negative bringing to the positive. He says, at the end of the day, Kol Yochel, the Eibishter could have done it differently. So we don't have answers. But as the Rebbe once wrote to a doctor, there's a letter in English, a 3-page letter, very powerful letter. He was asking the Rebbe the famous question, what happened with the Holocaust? Why did it happen? And the Rebbe says, point blank, he says the following. Many different letters, the same idea, but there it's extremely poignant and sharp to the point. Why? We don't know why. If God wanted us to know why, and it was important for our Avedus Hashem, our serving God, to know why, we would have been told why. The fact that we weren't told means we can serve completely, in the fullest fashion, without knowing the answer why. We don't ask why, we ask what are we going to do about it. It's a very different question. So the why, we can give all kinds of explanations or no explanations. What are we going to do about it? And when we do, maybe we start understanding a bit what came out of it. But we don't explain why a negative thing happened. That growth comes from it. That's not as justification, because maybe it could have come a different way. So let's look into this a little more based on the principles of this paradox of Gimmel Tammuz. So the Rebbe hat als bewarnt. That's what the Rebbe said about the Frierdiker Rebbe, and he passes that on himself, obviously. That he prepared us for everything. Whether we knew Gimmel Tammuz was coming, or Hashvi'i Oder before that, is irrelevant. But after the fact, there's no way that we would not have in our arsenal all the tools necessary. Sometimes you see them openly, sometimes you have to dig a bit. I would suggest you don't have to dig very far if you really just put things into context, which is what I'm going to do right now. Let's look at the events that led ultimately before Gimmel Tammuz, before Hashvi'i Oder. So the Rebbe was speaking extremely with a heightened sense of urgency about Mashiach and Geula. That was the tone, very heightened. So from the Maimer Basel Ganei Tovshin Yud Aleph, we knew this is it, Deir Hashvi'i. Interestingly, the Rebbe didn't mention Deir Hashvi'i very often over the years. Rarely, actually. And after late Mems, the Rebbe began to mention it almost constantly. Whether Deir Hashvi'i, or Higiyaz Mangul Aschem, or Dafnat Efren de Egen, or Im de Hochen Kulchem, Shen Zugepuz de Knechtplach. I mean, all the different, Welt is great. There were so many different expressions. And it intensified as an eyewitness and one who's zeicher to listen, remember, and write many of these sikhs. It was very clear, a heightened sense of urgency. Rachmana litzlan, to say that I sometimes hear people say, and I don't even want to repeat it, but I'm repeating it just leheitzi midas hatayim, that the Rebbe, after the Rebbe, since his talkus began to be more, quote unquote, desperate. Shmusel betachlis, first of all, as I'm going to speak about momentarily, Purim Mem Zayin, which is a critical sikh in this whole context, was before Memches. And it wasn't just Purim Mem Zayin. There were many of sikhs, and you saw the intensification through the Mems. Sheva Mitzvahs B'neiach, conquering the world, with Tzedek V'Yesher, moment of silence. So this is part of the process. Had the Rebbe started speaking about Mashiach and Tavshim Memches Memtes is one thing. But he didn't. Even that, the Rebbe is a Rebbe. He talks when he has to talk. It started Basel Ganei Tovshin Yud Aleph. It started, if you want, with the Baal Shem Tov when he heard from Mashiach, L'shifutza Menesecha Chutza, intensified each generation. And here it was coming to a crescendo, to a climax, to the conclusion of the process. Very clear. But I don't want to go into that right now because I just wanted to make that statement. So the Rebbe increase that urgency. Two sikhs stand out amongst many, many others. Time is limited, so I'm not going to go through the whole Ishtalshalos, but I'm going to want to call Purim Tavshin Mem Zayin, and of course Chof Ches Nisan Tavshin Nun Aleph. And if you look at them, they're almost the same content. However, Purim Tavshin Mem Zayin was said in a big farbrengen of 5-6 hours, and it was in a sense nivla. And you know, a big long farbrengen you don't always see standing out. Only now we see. Chof Ches Nisan was just a few minutes, and with very dramatic, strong terms. But was very common by the Rebbe that often he said something that earlier and waited to see, as he would often say, how Chassidim are going to respond. And then, years later, you suddenly see the Rebbe continuing that theme. What does the Rebbe say there? Extremely relevant to our story here. The Rebbe says Purim Mem Zayin. Again, it's context. It's not one isolated sikh. It's all part of context. He starts speaking about why the Geula didn't come yet. A big question I have. After the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Rebbe the Shver, as the Rebbe refers to the Frierdiker Rebbe, announced L'alta l'tshuva, l'alta l'geula in the early Shins, meaning in the 40s. So why Taka didn't come all these years? And he says he can't say it was a ketz, an eisrotzen, an auspicious time, as there was many times previous in history, and it didn't work out because the Frierdiker Rebbe said to publish it, and fusses l'deiris, and you have to say it continues on. The Rebbe says that. You could ask questions, you could this, but the Rebbe says that. So Giblim the Shailik. So why Taka didn't come? And the Rebbe says an expression you'll never hear before or after. The Rebbe says, La'achrei Yegia. I think Ribu Yegia. after much exertion and effort, the only answer I found was, as is übergegangen von Hanossi zu Akel. That the mission, the job of bringing the Geula went over from the Nossi, the Rebbe, to Akel, to the people. Hanossi hu Akel is the expression. So for Hanossi to Akel. If the Hiskashas, the Rebbe continues. If the connection and devotion of Chassidim to the Rebbe was, the boy was proper, then the Rebbe could do it. But since Nismayat HaLevovis, Nismayat HaAdeira, since it's not there in the fullest sense of the word, so it went over from the Rebbe to the Chassidim. The Rebbe's words. The Rebbe is saying that this came from a Yegiyah. And besides the fact that it's Metzias is that way, but he's telling us that's something. That means he wants us to know that he struggled with this, that it wasn't an easy conclusion. Went from Anosei to Akel. Now some people see this as terrible. What does that mean? So let's be makash ourselves to the Rebbe again. And that way we can get it back on track. But obviously, that was not meant to be. Even if some Chassidim felt that way, clearly what happened was a few years later, we're talking 4 years later, comes Chav Ches Nisan. What does the Rebbe say? Ich habe alt getan, mehr weiß ich nicht, was ich kennt. And I didn't bring the Geula. Tut alles, was ihr kennt. I'm throwing it to you. That's the only thing I can do left is to give it to you. Almost word for word from Purim. Purim was actually more at length. And on Sunday, $8 afterwards. And then the Rebbe continues before I go to that. He says, maybe there'll be 10 of you, in action, that you'll cry, Ad Mosai Mitanemis. Later, at the end of the Sikh of the Rebbe, he writes, and there should be 1, 2, or 3 of you that'll put your heads together. Vossaton, Vossaton, Vitsaton, should be Simcha V'tuv Levov, and Sunday by dollars. A woman who had just lost a child went by dollars, and she said to the Rebbe, you're leaving us hanging, Rebbe. By telling us to do. You have to. And the Rebbe says, if all of you can't do it, what could one person do? I'm only one person. She says, you're not one person, you're the Rebbe. And then the Rebbe says, if I'm the Rebbe, that you're calling me the Rebbe, I'm telling you, and he points to her, you have to do, and you have to do, and you have to do, and you have to do. She says, I want my child back. You're leaving us hanging. Yes, we need you. She keeps saying that. If I'm the Rebbe, I'm the rabbi, you have to do, you have to do, you have to do. Now we know that Rebbe's compassion. For a woman especially, she's definitely sincere. We're not talking about, this wasn't like, you could say she's faking it. Sincere. And yet it was so important to the Rebbe that you have to do, you have to, and I am telling you, you have to do. What do you take away from this? Not, God forbid, that the Rebbe is dropping the ball, Chaz v'shalom. He's saying, I'm not going to do, you're going to do. I did my part, now I'm giving you koyach to do. For some reason. Maybe we will understand, we won't understand. It needs to go over. We have to do something we were not going to do until now. In other words, the contract in Tovshin Yud Aleph was, we're small little people. Rebbe, tell us what to do. We'll fabring. We'll become shluchim. We'll do your bidding. Whatever you ask us to do, we'll do. We'll bring it to you, and you take care of the big picture. You deal with God, you deal with this, and we'll march behind you to the Gula Amitis Vashlem. That was always the so-called unspoken pact, agreement. Suddenly, put in Mem Zayin, he began from Hanossi Takel. Chaz v'sholem, the Rebbe is a Nossi forever, a Nossi is a Nitzchi. The Rebbe was not saying otherwise, that there's a part of the job that the Hakel has to do. We always knew that you need people. Malchus Eberotz and Kibla Aleim, we have to accept the Malchus. There was always Aveda B'Keyach Atzmei. That was a big fundamental principle from the Rebbe beginning of the Nesias. B'chlal Chassidus, you have to do your part. But here clearly we have to do a bit more. A bit more. And Chav Ches Nisan sealed it. What happens next? Chassidim are confused. Would I say they did anything more? Maybe in Tammuz, people added things and people tried to do things. What happened? A lot of confusion. What are we supposed to do? Should we scream Ad Mosai? Should we scream Yechi? Should we not? Everybody had their different things. People really wanted, and sincerely, Chassidim want to do what the Rebbe wants. But most could not I would say all of us could not wrap our head. What does the Rebbe want us to do? And all the questions to the Rebbe, Derech Yeshara, continue doing Torah mitzvahs, the Derech Yeshara, everything should be saturated with Geula. People never really said, what am I? Miftzah Tefillin is a specific miftzah. Go find every boy or adult man after Bar Mitzvah and help him and inspire him to put on tefillin. Miftzah Neshek, Miftzah Tefillah, Miftzah Torah, Miftzah Mezuzah, Miftzah Tzedakah. Same with all the mitzvahs. They're defined. Mashiach. And that, of course, contributed to a lot of the disagreements and so on. But I'm sticking to what the Rebbe said. What happened next? After Chav Ches Nisan, 11 months to the day. Count 11 months from Chav Ches Nisan. Tell me what's the date? Chav Zayin Oder Tov Shenun Beis. Now we know the number 11 is not a small number by us. Yud Aleph Nisan, all the Ramozim, all the hints to Yud Aleph, Tov Shen Yud Aleph Shvat. The day after Yud, 11 months to the day of Chav Ches Nisan. Tragically, what the Rebbe said, I did everything, now you do, now in a way that was completely unwanted. Now the Rebbe is not speaking. The Shemesh has been silenced to some extent. Kemuven, nothing happens to the Rebbe without his askama. But that's what happened. So what the Rebbe said, continued verbringing after Chav Ches Nisan. The Rebbe continued speaking and continued directives. But in a way, we were now charged with something. Purim Mem Zayin, it should have began. But now we were charged with something. In a way, you could say the Rebbe was waiting. The Eibishter was waiting. 11 months. It's suddenly now getting more serious. The Rebbe is not speaking. What he said in that Sikha Chav Ches Nisan, what does the Rebbe say? That noch habir in Rambam, noch Rashi, all the different Lashonos, and not mit das Abdrucken, mit das Verschreiben und Abdrucken liegen auf a Politzer. In other words, it can't be business as usual continuing doing the same thing. And then, tragically, the Rebbe stopped speaking. There was no other beer in Rambam, and no beer in Azayr, and not in Pirkei Avos, and not in Rashi, and all the other Mayin HaMizgaber, the Mayin HaMizgaber, that no one could even imagine, seized. This overwhelming wellspring, hours, a Mayim She'en Lam Sof, you listen to the Fabrengens, seized Le'esato. And what did the Rebbe say 6 weeks before the stroke? On Gimmel Shvat Tov Shinun Beis. He spoke a whole arichas about a stroke, Friedrich Rebbe, and comparing it to Moshe, who Lo Ish Dvarim Anechi is a man of no words. Aral Sfasayim, Kvad Peh, Kvad Loshen. And what does the Rebbe say? That when a Rebbe has a stroke, those that heard his words have to become his mouthpiece. You have to do your part. You have to do your part. Mamish the fulfillment, but in the way that we never wanted or expected, or it's actually a horrible way. One could say, and you don't have to take a big stretch to say, that had we done what our part that the Rebbe referred to on Purim Mem Zayin and Chav Ches Nisan, we wouldn't need a stroke and we wouldn't need all the helamas because we're doing it. But here not, okay. Now I am going to be quiet. Let me see what you do. When the sun is shining brightly, sometimes it says in Gemara, Shraga B'tira Mayahana. A flame, a little flame, Mayahana, does no benefit. What benefit is there? A little flame in the light. In a dark room, a light of flame changes everything. You can see. But in the sunlight, it even darkens the area, Chassidus says, the flame. Not only does it not increase sunlight, it darkens. So when the Pnei Meshek, Pnei Chama was shining brightly, you don't see the cracks. You don't really see the Aveda B'Kei Chatzmi in the fullest sense. There was Aveda B'Kei Chatzmi, of course, Shluchus, people, when Mesidus Nefesh, what the Rebbe wanted, but not completely a Helam. The Rebbe Sichus, Tu B'Shvat Lametes, Heshayin Rabba Mem Daled, Asara B'Tevis Mem Daled. Have one central theme there. When the Rebbe cries, Mamish P'chiyas Atzumas, and says, why? How long? Wie viel the Shir noch geb Mataive? Zontig gesucht, Montig gesucht. Then what does the Rebbe say? That the only, among through his tears, he says. The only way to explain is, well, the Eibishter Vilma is Shreim et Hanemes, and that's only possible if there's a complete concealment. If not, it's not Shreim et Hanemes. Suddenly, Chav Zayin Oder, and then 2.5 years later, which we'll get to in a minute, Gimmel Tammuz. Now, what are you going to do without the Gilui Hashemesh be'er hayem, be'etzem hayem hazeh? Shemesh be given dame on Gimmel Tammuz. The sun is not shining. But now is when the stars emerge. When the sun is shining, you can't see stars. You can't see the moon. Now you could see it. And it's not our own light, it's the Shemesh's light. Now it's working, as we read earlier, it's working through us. Now we, the stars, have to demonstrate what are you capable of. And the Rebbe gave the Koyach and the Hira and the Sinas Koyach, the directive. That's what he said. Tut als was kent. You are the stars, shine with my light. I'm giving you the power. The Shemesh continues to shine wherever it is. It continues to shine even in the night, but now not directly, but through the stars and through the moon and the stars. So what taka is the inyan of this Aveda B'Koyach Hatzmid? Is something we have to do. So it's not a new chiddush. Anyone who's learned a little chiddush knows what it says in Teira Eir. In Teira Eir, in the Parsha Bereshis, paraphrasing a bit, the big question: had Odom and Chava not eaten from Esadas, what would have happened? Gula would have come, of course. But how would it come? You need to be mevarer the whole kavanas of Eidos Habirurim. So he gives the moshel, the Alter Rebbe, of Neir Avuka, a flaming torch, a very powerful torch. If it's powerful enough, it can draw the Netzutze Kedusha, the divine sparks, wherever they may be on earth. So we're Adam and Chava in Gan Eden. They would have drawn a mile lamata, all the sparks from all over the world. Since they didn't do the job, so what does Abish to do? He has to separate the job between more people. 2 people are not going to be able to accomplish it, because they also had the accumulation of all the Yetzer Haras of all of history that was opposing and pushed them to eat from the Eitz Hadas. Now the job is given to 4 people, and then to 8 people, and then to 16 people. This explains transmigration, the population growth, and the movement, because now you can't be mevar the netzutzes mamay lamata completely. Now you have to go find them. But still, it was stages. You find them, first you go to Eretz Yisrael, Chatzi Kadra Elyon, Matan Teira. That also didn't accomplish it. So now we also come to Chatzi Kadra Tachten. 80 years ago, the Frierdiker Rebbe comes to America. 79 years ago, the Rebbe comes to America, just a few days before Gimmel Tammuz. Interesting. A new Tnufa Chadosh, a new stage in the work of spreading Torah and Yiddishkeit, the light of Torah now, even in Chetzi Kadra Tachten. Because the sparks have to now be found Mamata Lamaila. It's not enough to do the work in one place, and it will draw the sparks, like it was Malchus Shvo came to Shleima HaMelech. We have to now go access those sparks. And the Rebbe makes it clear in Vayeshev Tovshinun Beis that now you have Jews all over the world and Shluchim all over the world. So we are everywhere. That doesn't mean you have to find every last spark. The Alter Rebbe says in Tanya that when they brought a Minches Selas, it elevated the whole Minhat Semeach. Once we are everywhere, so we have the representation of a Mamata Lamaila de Kavedas. Explains in Sharia Eira at length the difference between Zochu and Achishena. That if it's Mamayla Lamata, it happens faster, but it's not such a Bir Pnimi. Mamata Lamayla is a Bir Pnimi because you actually go to each spark. You're not just gathering them like a large flame. So if the sun is shining in the fullest intensity, it can elevate everything. But the Rebbe gave us the schus, like he said. The Rebbe can't uftan and bring Mashiach himself, but he wanted us to be partners. So there has to be some Mamata Lamayla. We have to go to our respective countries and cities and states and communities, and even in the far outskirts, to gather Echad Mehem, go to the Barbaria, Echad, the Sarmatia. Tzedakah Osa Kodesh Baruch Hu Shepizun Lebeina Umas. What's the tzedakah? That the tzedakah is that we find the sparks in each of these places, and now it's a bitter Pnimi. So it's not, if you think about it, so Purim Mem Zayin and Chav Ches Nissen is part of that flow. The Rebbe is saying, till now, you did enough Mamat L'Mayla, and now something more is needed from you. Something that you, Kav Yochel, need to do that I am not going to do or cannot do, in the Rebbe's words. A little more Mamat L'Mayla. I always understood that up till that point, maybe we have to do this mitzvah, that mitzvah, but to teach people Eined Mulvade, Elokuz Bepshitus, that was something some people were kelim and some were not. The Rebbe starts saying the world is ready to hear more. That means we can give more. So there's something, both in Echos and Kamas, we need to increase that was not done before. Same Torah, same mitzvah, same chassidus, but a new dimension that comes from our part. So it's not such a pella that the Mamat L'Mayla is expected of us. We would have rather not have that. We would rather the hiskashas to the sun, to the Pnei Chama, Pnei Meshach and Pnei Chama would have been strong enough. But night has come. Night has fallen. And perhaps this can explain the posuk where he says, because in this broader context, maybe in the time of Yeshua it wasn't fully understood, but now it's very much understood. There was no such day before and after. A day where on one hand, the night has come, the sun has set. But the truth is the sun continues to shine even stronger than before in the stars. In the time of Yeshua, the sun continued to shine as they continued to battle. In our case, the sun actually set. And the battle continues, but we are empowered with the Shemesh's energy and light that gives light to the stars. But we are the stars, and we have to shine and glitter. A star is much smaller than a sun, especially as it's seen on Earth. But it glitters, it shines, and it's bringing sunlight to people. But through the lens of a star, which is far, far less, but still it's light. That's our mission today. So when you look at the whole context of where we are and what we're left to do, someone will say, okay, so what are you supposed to do? Gimmel Tammuz is a day where we have to dedicate. Am I doing what the Rebbe asked me to accomplish or not? And am I doing the same thing I did last year or yesterday or the year before? Because it's very clear that the results demonstrate what the reality is. The result has to be the Geula Amitis Vashlema Kipshute. And we were told we can do things, both on a small scale and on a large scale. And I'll make a few practical suggestions. But it has to be seen that we have to see ourselves as if the Rebbe called you into Yechidus. The Rebbe said many times by Fabrengen, he's talking to each one individually, not as a group. And the Rebbe called you in and said, I did everything I can, now I'm giving it to you. Would you leave any stone unturned? Especially now when the sun is in the shadows or the sun is on the other part of the earth? Of course not. So we have to, that simas lev, that care has to be like the Rebbe speaking to you. You can't say, bigger people than me didn't do it, how can I do it? 26 years, nothing happened, or nothing ultimately brought the Gula. So what am I going to do now differently? That's not an answer. That's not how the Rebbe taught us and trained us. So a few practical things that we can do to be the stars that will shine the Rebbe's light through us to the world. Each in our own community. I'll start one example. Definitely have people that are broad-thinking people. Some of them have global businesses. And they think great. They're not just thinking how to deal with one market, one community. Maybe it's time to go into a person like that and say, I have a challenge for you. Not ask them for money. The challenge is my Rebbe, our Rebbe, was universal. He wanted the whole world to be filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea. We're living now in a time of a pandemic, and there's an unbelievable, unprecedented opportunity here, a wake-up call. People are vulnerable, receptive. What would you do as a businessman if I said, here's a product, I want to bring it to the whole world? He'll say, what's the product? Say the product is world peace. The product is eradication of famine. that people in materialism, to permeate that our material life should be all focused toward a higher spiritual state. Explain it. Explain it. There are different places we find, I've spoken about this a number of times, examples. There's the story with the laundromat that Rebbe explains how in laundry you see, even laundry, a material, mundane thing like that. It doesn't get more mundane. How you could see a lesson for neshama, the refreshing of a soul, like you refresh new garments. You have how you see through medicine, you see mipsari erzelaka, through science, through medicine. You see through the world's lens, through technology, we see Achdus Hashem. Many examples we have. And say, this is what I'd like to bring to the world. What would you do? Besides the fact that you'll create a deep connection with a person who thinks like that, he may come up with some very interesting ideas. Now, he may say we need a lot of money, but let's not talk about money. Let's talk what would be done. What campaign would it be? The Rebbe said to CNN, increase in acts of goodness and kindness. How do we make a big campaign of that? And that's on the global. Then there's on the individual scale. Ask your children, ask yourself, ask your family to just one thing. Envision how would the Geula look like if Mashiach came right now. Right now in Gimmel Tammuz. What would the world look like? What would the streets look like? What would the stores look like? If you can't envision it, you can't create it. Envisioning is when the Rebbe said, Lilmid in Yonah Geula Mashiach, is like Kolat Esek B'Teira. Why do we learn the halachas of Yom Tov, a month, Shleishim Yom Kedem Achag? Because you need to know what to do before you do it. You have to learn the halachas of Geula Mashiach to know what is it going to look like. And then you can say, that's what it looks like. Now I can envision it. Now I can say, here's what I can do to make my home and my community a little Mashiachdik. Don't just keep it in your head. Motivate, challenge your children. Give them incentives, give them a prize. You'll be surprised if you make this a type of real experience. How will Mashiach and Geula look like? How will my life look? How will my work look? How will your work look? You'll be surprised what kind of response you get. I'm just giving a few suggestions. Nothing new, in a sense. Still all the same Teda, the same Mashiach, but it's new, a new effort that we can do, that Kavyochel the Rebbe said, I'm giving it in your hands. And you can come up with other ideas. So Gimmel Tammuz, I would say, is a day of brainstorming, if you wish. A day of planning. A day of strategy. What strategy? What the Rebbe said in the last words of Chof Ches Nissen. Tutals v'sir Kent, and then he said, will be 1, 2, or 3 of you, that's zusammenreden, we'll discuss what to do, how to do. So for me, Gimmel Tammuz is a strategy day. When I say strategy, I don't mean just theory strategy. Plan. A day of accountability to say to the Rebbe, 26 years ago, whatever reason, the sun, you are not shining the way you shined then. But I know you're shining even more than ever. And I know I'm one of your stars. 2.5 years earlier, Hashem quieted you. Before that, 11 months before that, I know what you said. Do whatever you can. 4 years before that, I'm putting Mem Zayin. It went over to Hakel. On Gimmel Tammuz, I'm saying to you, Rebbe, taking all that trajectory, that storyline, that narrative, and I'm taking it to heart. I have no excuse for the last 26 years. I don't know why I or others didn't do what we should have done. Now, you want to give excuses, but I'm telling you how I would speak. Rebbe, but now, time has come. And maybe this big wake-up call in the world today, this whole disruption of COVID-19, and in America especially the social tensions and the civil unrest, is a time that imlei achshav emasai, if not now, when? And Rebbe, I, on this Gimmel Tammuz, take upon myself to be a star that shines more than ever in my community, with my people. I'm going to do a few new things. And here's the list. Number 1, I'm going to call people, and not just repeat party lines or repeat cliches. I'm going to say, let's figure out how we can envision and live more Mashiachdik. Maybe it's more Achdus. Maybe it's a little more commitment. It's more of taking our material lives and recognizing it's really just a keli, a channel for Ruchnius. Like we see today, the world's material world has been disrupted. There's a bigger plan. Maybe it's doing something more global. And maybe much more than what I just said. Not maybe, for sure more than what I just said. This is our calling now. This is Gimmel Tammuz. So this day of paradox, let's make it a day where yes, the sun has paused, but it continues to shine. It continues to shine in new ways, in strange ways, through stars, even in the night, even in the dark. And it was a day where God listened to man. So it says, it's mashma, that's what was unique about it. L'shmoya Hashem b'kol ish. It's as if God never listened to the voice of man, he never listened to Moshe. But something here, something kol ish, something mamata lamayla is emphasized. Like I said before, the Rebbe said, tutvas irken, something you need to do, kol ish. So may we turn this Gimmel Tammuz, that Hashem should see the kol ish, that we did our part, and now Hashem and Rebbe, we did our part, what you asked us to do. Listen to it, and fight for us. Ki Hashem nilchem liYisrael. Fight for us to finish the last shreds, the last fragments of Golus. Sebrenchen the vent von Golus, as the Frierdiker Rebbe said. And we should be able to see the Geula Hamitis Vashleimah, you reunited with the Rebbe. And that Gimmel Tammuz, this paradoxical day of mystery, should be revealed as was Gimmel Tammuz 93 years ago. That this is the beginning stage where we turned a day that was so dark, a day where the sun became concealed and silenced, into a day where we shine with the Rebbe's koyach, like true stars in heaven, kichvei hashamayim, and that we turn it into an aschalta de geula, that though it hasn't been seen yet, that this becomes the first step that we did what the Rebbe wanted, the kol ish, and now we're marching to the geula hamitis v'ashlema. So Gimmel Tammuz becomes a stepping stone in a process, as does Chav Zayin Oder, of a process of what beginning of history, and accelerated generation after generation, till the Gili of Chassidus through the Baal Shem Tov Yifutza Ma'asecha Chutza, and then through the Gili of Teres Chassidus Chabad, the Siyah Chabad from the Alter Rebbe, all the way to the Deir Hashvi'i of the Rebbe, all the way through all the years where the Rebbe said Deir Hashvi'i, this is it, and all the years, and finally the Sichos of Purim Mem Zayin and Chav Ches Nisan Nun Aleph. That now do your final part, something that has not been done before by you. Something that will finish the job, will tip the scale, and will finally be able to see Begili in Gimmel Tammuz, in this Yem, should be a Yem, Lo Yehoya Kiyem Ahu Lefon of Achrav. That's a Nitzchi Zdika Posik. That Posik will be also when Mashiach comes. That this day becomes a day that was never before, never after, because it's the Geula HaMitis V'Ashlema, V'hu Yigaleinu, together with the Rebbe. It should be B'mheir V'yameinu Mamish today, Gimmel Tammuz.
In a yom test other sheni, the Rebbe brings his maitik letter from the Feidik Rebbe and writes like this: Geidel hatshukel hiskashrus yochil lehasbia rak asher ilmeid mamori achsidus she'imer harav v'kesev kibiriyah sponim bilvad leisagi. The tshuke, the yearning for hiskashrus to the Rebbe, you can only satisfy it only when you learn the mamori chsidus from the Rebbe, because just b'riyah sponim, just with riyah, with seeing the Rebbe alone is not enough. This is a letter from the Feidik Rebbe, and when we look inside the letter from the Feidik Rebbe, we see that the Feidik Rebbe writes like this. He says that b'negeya, it's an answer to a bocher that's asking a seder in learning, and he writes like this: Geidel tishukose liiskashrus amitis yochil hasbia rak asher ilmeid mamori chsidus shomarti v'kosafti. And then the Feidik Rebbe adds on, V'dovor ze nikro hekerus. This is called hekerus. This is called the true knowing and the true connection one to the other. Ki b'riyah sponim bilvad leisagi. And over here we see, in the addition of these words, V'dovor ze nikro hekerus. Through learning the Torah from the Rebbe, this is called that we are makir. We are makir the Rebbe, and the Rebbe is makir us. We know the Rebbe, and the Rebbe knows us. And all this is through the Mamori Chsidis she'omarti v'kosafti. So the Mamori Chsidis the Rebbe wrote, and the Rebbe said. The same thing we find in another Hayim game of Chavdalot Tzivon, that someone asks the Rebbe, how could he be mekusher to him me'achar she'enei makiri ponim? Since physically we do not know each other, how can I become connected to the Rebbe? And the Rebbe writes in that Hayim Yem the same Nekuda. And this is through limud teirase, through learning the Torah from the Rebbe and keeping the takonis from the Rebbe. But we see from here that through learning the Torah from the Rebbe, it's not only a replacement, it's pale, the same inyan as if it would be makiri ponim. This creates the hekeros from the chassid to the Rebbe and the Rebbe to the chassid. Let's understand a little bit what is the maila, what is the yichudiyus, what is the specialty from learning the Torah from the Rebbe, and why does the Rebbe write in Hayim Yem of Tes Oder that the tshuke of iskashrus amitis can only be through learning the Mamori Chsidis. When we talk about the Ina from Limud HaTorah Bechlal, and we look in Tanya, we see that in Tanya Gufa, there's a few biurim and a few stages how the Alter Rebbe explains the Maila from Limud HaTorah. In Tanya Perikei, the Alter Rebbe is Mevair, the Maila from Limud HaTorah, that is that it's Peyu la Ichud Nifla, She'ein Ichud Komeyu, V'lei Ke'erke Nimtzo Klal, which means the Alter Rebbe is Mevair Barichas and Tanya Perik Dalad and in Perik Hey. The difference of mitzvahs and Torah. Mitzvahs are called levushim, and Torah is called mozeh. V'seirascha v'seich meyay, which in the Asis of Chassidus is the union of makif and pnimi. When a person is wearing a levush, the levush protects him. The levush makes sure he's not cold, he's not hot, but the levush does not become part of the person. Masha'enkein, the union of mozeh, when a person eats, so whatever he eats becomes damu basam ipsari, part of him becomes connected to him. A chiluk of the person himself. This is the chiluk of eir makif and eir pnimi. Eir makif could be a tremendously high eir, but it doesn't connect to the place where the eir comes. The eir Hashemish could be meir, and it could be a eir bilti mukbul, but does not connect and not change the place where the eir Hashemish is made. The Eir Hashemish is made in a room, the tables and chairs in the room will remain exactly the same. Masha'ik, when a person eats, it changes the person physically, the person becomes different. And the same thing, we talk about Baruch Nisay Yonim, there's Eiris Makifim and Eiris Pnimim, which is the union of mitzvahs and Torah. Eir Makif is a Eir, which is made in the person, made in the world, but it's made in the even of levush. It's pale in the even of levush. The person does not become yuchid, does not become one with that eir. And this is the end of a mitzvah. A mitzvah is a eir makif. A mitzvah, a person is mekayim b'derech gezeire. Asher kedishonu b'mitzveisav v'tzivonu. You're mekayim a mitzvah because the Eibishter was mitzavi. He told you that's what you should do. And just like when a eved is mekayim the kude, the order of the melech, he does not become one with the melech. The eved remains the eved, which is mekayim the gzeire and the order he gets from the melech, but does not connect, does not become yuchid with the melech himself. Masha'inkin, the union of Teira is called mozein. And a yid learns Teira, and a yid understands and is teifes the Teira in his seichel. So like that Rebbe explains Barikas and Pedekei, so this pales a ichud niflo from the person that's understanding the Teira with the Teira itself, which is the Eibishter's Chochmah. And what is the Eibishter's Chochmah? That Rebbe is masbir that the Eibishter's Chochmah is connected to Ein Sof himself. Hu v'chochmasi echad. The Eibishter put himself in his Chochmah. Afal pi that the Chochmah that we are learning, the Teira we are learning is Megubish and Dvarim Gashmi. The Alter Rebbe is masbir that the Eibishter through lower down his Chochmah, here lemato, and not even that every single person should be able to be masik and understand the Chochmah. But a person has to know that afal pi that he's learning the Chochmah, the way it's melubish na davar gashmi, it's only a levush. He has to look at the davar gashmi, which is learning about as only a levush, which in this is chochmase, is barich, mamish, with its entire takif. This is the nikud of Tanya Pedekei. Then we come to Tanya Pedekei of Gimmel. Tanya Pedekei of Gimmel, the Alter Rebbe also talks about the Maila from Limud Atei over Kiyum HaMitzvahs. And over there, the Alter Rebbe is Meisef another Nekud. Another Nekud in the Maila from Atei Legabe HaMitzvah. Alter Rebbe says, the Yichud from a person that is being Mekayim HaMitzvah to the Eibishter is like the Yichud from a Merkava to a Reichev. Or like the Yichud from a Guf to a Neshama. Which as much as the Merkava is bottled to the Reichev, and as much as the Guf is bottled to the Neshama, Sof Kol Sof, it's two separate things. There's a Metzias of a Merkava, which is bottled to the Reichev. There's a Metzias of a Guf, which is bottled to the Neshama. And after all the Beyurim you learn Chassidus, and Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya Pedekei of Gimmel how bottled the Guf is, that as soon as the Nefesh wants something, right away then the Guf is going to do it, but it's not one. It's two things which one is being nisbatel in its highest measure. One is being nisbatel to the other one. Masha'inkin, the union of Teira, Alter Rebbe says, it's not the taich that it's one thing being nisbatel to something else. It's one inyan mamish. When a yid learns Teira, this is the Eibishter's Chochmah. More beprotis. Alter Rebbe is masbir. When a person is doing a mitzvah, so there is the Eibishter's Rotzen, the Eibishter wants the mitzvah. But sof kol sof, there is the pu'ula of the person that is doing the mitzvah. The actual pu'ula of the person is not part, that is not the Rotzen itself. He is fulfilling the Rotzen. It's a fulfillment of the Rotzen. But that is not the actual Rotzen. Masha'inkin, when you learn Teira, what are you learning? You're learning Dvar Hashem. This is the Eibishter's words. This is Chochmah Seyur Etzeine Yizborech. You're not fulfilling the Eibishter's Chochmah. This is the Eibishter's Chochmah. So we'll take example. When a Melech wants a house, he wants a palace. And there's two kinds of people that are busy with the Melech's palace. You have the Avodim, the builders that are building the palace of the Melech, taking the bricks and the wood, and they are building the palace. Then you have the Bit Chachomim that are sitting and trying to figure out what the Melech wants. The Melech wrote a blueprint, and he wrote his Chochmah, how he wants the bayis should be, and he wrote it all out on a paper. And there's Chachomim sitting trying to figure out what the Melech meant. The builders who are building the bayis, they are fulfilling the Ratzon HaMelech. They don't have the actual Ratzon. They are building, taking bricks and wood, and through that, doing what the Melech wants. But the people who are sitting and trying to figure out what the Melech thought, they actually have the thoughts of the Melech. They have the Etzem HaChochmeh. They have the Etzem HaRotz. The Rebbe calls it in Tanya Peruchov Gimmel that in mitzvahs there's a hester upon it. The Gilui Elokus does not come totally begilui, because sof kol sof the mitzvah, the rotzen is connecting to something else. The shom is connecting to a guf. There's a reichiv and there's a merkava. There is the rotzen of the Eibishter and the person doing the mitzvah. Masha'in kain, when you learn Torah, this here the rotzen ha'elien is begilui mamish beli hester upon him klal. Here you have the Eibishter's rotzen and the Eibishter's chochmah as it is. And that's why Dafkan Torah we say, Yisrael, Eiraiso v'kutshabrichu kul achat. Eiraiso v'kutshabrichu are chat. It's not two things, it's one thing. That's why many places in Chassidus we learn that the difference of Kiyum HaMitzvah and Limud HaTorah is that the Kiyum HaPerson's Mekayim HaMitzvah is like an Eved that is fulfilling the Ratzon HaMelech. When a person is learning Torah, he is like the Melech himself. Like the Gemara says, Man Malki Rabban. When you're doing a mitzvah, you are an Eved. You're not the Melech. You're fulfilling the Ratzon HaMelech. But when you're learning Torah, when you find many places in Chassidus the Lashon Dvorei Hashesamti Beficha, Ani HaMishna HaMedaberes Beficha. This is Dvar HaMelech Mamish Shchina Medaberes Miteigreit. So here we have already a higher level, a higher stage, and a deeper view in the mile of a mitzvah, the mile of Torah over mitzvahs, that in the Eifun HaYichud in Torah legabe mitzvahs. And why is Torah more miyuchid? Why are you more miyuchid than the Eibishter than a mitzvah? Is because in Torah, here the Eibishter is beli hester pon. Mashiach, in a mitzvah, there is more, is not as begilui. There is more of a hester pon. In the Rebbe Sichis, we find many times the expression that the difficulty of Torah and a mitzvah is, the types of mitzvah means a commandment, a tzivui. There's a tzivui le'odom. You're talking to someone. Chochmah, what's thinking of Chochmah? That's the way I understand. It's not what I am talking to somebody else. I'm telling somebody else what to do. This is my Chochmah. Mitzvahs, tzivui already gives a certain sinas smokim to azulas. Already gives a certain sinas smokim to somebody else. I'm talking to someone. Chochmah is me, myself, without having any relationship to azulas. And that's why the Gilui Elokus in Chochmah, the Gilui Elokus in Chochmah is Barich in Torah is higher than the way it is in mitzvahs. And that's why the Yichud with the Eibishter through Torah is a Yichud Gomor more than the Yin of a mitzvah. Then we come to Tanya Perek Lamed Zayin. Tanya Perek Lamed Zayin, the Alter Rebbe also discusses Ba'arichis the Meile from Torah legabe a mitzvah. But there the Alter Rebbe says that mitzvahs are called Eivorim de Malka. Mitzvahs are called a Eiver. What is a Eiver? A Eiver is a Eiver Proti. Every Eiver is an individual Eiver. And why are mitzvahs called Eivorim de Malka? Because through every mitzvah you're Mekayim, you're a Mamshech, a certain individual Amshoch here Lamata. Masha'ik in Torah is the Inyan of Reishu Meach. And in the Alter Rebbe's Loshen, in Tanya Perek Lamed Zayin, the Alter Rebbe says, Zeis, the Eidacheres, in addition to all the miles that the Alter Rebbe says before, the Negia, the mile from Torah, Legabe Mitzvahs, the Alter Rebbe says that the highest mile there is in Torah, Legabe a Mitzvah is that Torah is the Yin of Reishu Meach, and in the Alter Rebbe's Loshen, Zeis Veidacheres v'ha'ila al kulona, b'mailus esek talmud Torah al kol ha-mitzvahs, because mitzvahs is only Eivorim de Malka. And just like by a person, there is no erech, no comparison between the chayis of the Ramach Eivorim, l'gab the chayis shebemechin. It's a much higher chayis. Of derech zeh, when we talk in Torah, the hamshoche, the level of chayis your mamshich, the level of Eid Elikir mamshich is a much higher level in the Eid Elikir. And a fourth place in Tanya, where the Alter Rebbe talks about the mile from Torah, is in Tanya Perek Mem Zayin. Tanya Perek Mem Zayin, the Alter Rebbe brings what it says, V'ikchu li truma. V'ikchu li truma. And truma is referring to the Inyan of Torah. Torah was given in 40 days. Why does it say V'ikchu li truma? It should have said V'ikchu li utruma. You take the Eibishter and you learn Torah. The Ikhuli Truma means Esiatem Leichem. When you learn Torah, this is the way you take Li. This is the way you connect to Atos Amos. You take the Eibishter himself through learning Torah. When we talk about learning the Torah from the Rebbe, and the Rebbe tells us that the emes in von Iskashros is through Limut Torah. And this is the way you can be Masbiya the Iskashros. Iskashros Amitis. We have in the Limut Torah from the Rebbe all these protim that we just learned, we just mentioned now from Tanya. The first thing is when a Yid learns Torah from the Rebbe, so he becomes connected, he becomes miyuchad with the Rebbe. His kashrus means connection. What does connection mean? That the chassid and the Rebbe connect. They become like one. There's many dargis in his kashrus. When we learn in Lakuti Diburim, in the beginning, it talks about many the levels in his kashrus of Avana Ben, and Avana Talmud, and a chassid and a Rebbe, and a Erumoy, and a Rebbe and chassid is the highest level, which includes all levels, the deepest level of his kashrus, where one and the other one connect, become like one thing, mamish. Emeseris kashrus is when it's an eifon of yichud, mozein, when it's only be'eifon makif, as it can be by riyas ponim. So then I didn't become one. I am still a mitzias b'fnei atzmei. Masha'inke, when I'm learning the Torah from the Rebbe, and I understand it with my seichel, and in a eifon of avonah v'asoge, in a eifon of yediyah, and like the Alter Rebbe is madgish tanya perikei, especially it has to be shura yoli omke al-buri, has to be a very clear understanding. Then chochma savaye bikir bey, as the lotion from the Alter Rebbe in Tanya. He has the Eibush, the Rebbe's chochma in himself, and became part of him. It became his mozin, damo bosan bipsori. Like you see the Gashmis, when a person learns something, you learn even a halacha. So you learn a svara in Gemara, even in Nigla. It becomes part of your seichel changes. Your seichel starts thinking differently. You become a different type of a person. You have different hanochis, different mindsets. When you learn the Torah from the Rebbe, it becomes damu basam b'psori. It becomes miyuchad b'tni, yichud niflo. So b'meila, the gashmi is mamish. The person has a change in the person. The person has a different mindset. A person that learns the Torah from the Rebbe, he thinks different. He has different hanochis, different mindsets, different understanding. He has poshet the Rebbe's chochmah, the Rebbe's way of thinking in him. Then there's another nikud, and that's what we mentioned before from the later prokim in Tanya. Besides the fact that the person becomes miyuchid with the Rebbe, he becomes one with the Rebbe through learning the Rebbe's Torah, and that's why that is the iskashus amitis. It's also mitzad the Rebbe, that where does the Rebbe put himself into? Like we said before, the Lashon and Tanya Vechom Gimmel. Where does the Eibishter beli hester upon him? Where do you have the Rebbe himself? Where does the Esi Atem Leichem? Where do you have the Reishu Meach? This is in Limut Torah, in his Chochm. And Chassidus explained by Arichas why Dafki in Chochmah. We know what it is in Tanya, in Perek Lamed Hey, that Chochmah is the Keli for Ein Sof. This is not the place to go into is thinking about Arichas. But Chochmah is the Keli which can contain the Etzem HaNefesh. The Etzem HaNefesh can put itself and be nimshach into Chochmah. That is the gather of Chochmah. That's what we learned the Lashon Chassidus, Pnimis Abba, Pnimis Atik. We'll not go into now about Arichas of this Indian. But Chochmah contains, and Chochmah is a Keli for the Etzem HaNefesh Mamish. Pnimis Abba, Pnimis Atik. The Etzem of the Rebbe is where this is, he puts himself in his Torah. Eisi Atem Leich. That's why the Torah is called the Reishu Meach. And like we mentioned before from Tanya Perek Lamed Zayin, that there's the Madrege from Ivorim the Malka. An Iver is an individual, I'm sure the Protis. Torah is the Reishu Meach. Torah is connected to the Etzem HaNefesh, which is in the Reishu Meach. The Etzem of the Rebbe puts himself in his Torah. That's why we know the famous Lashon, which the Gemara says. And the Rebbe quotes it many, many times. B'negei limud teirasi from the Sidereinu. Ano nafshi ksovis Yehovis. The post of Pshat in the Gemara, no nafshik sovis yovis, means that the Eibishter himself wrote and gave the Torah. But the way the Rebbe brings the Maimer Azal and the Girs, the way the Rebbe brings it, and no nafshi, kasvis yahavis, means that not that I wrote and I gave. I wrote myself into the Torah. I gave myself into the Torah. What is myself nafshi? My etzem. My etzem I put into the Torah. And the same way for Gabe the Eibishter, as they tzadikim deimel lebeira. What is the pshat tzadikim deimel lebeira? They're also by a tzaddik. Where is the etzem of the tzaddik? The etzem of the tzaddik is ksovis yehovis. He puts it into the Torah that he says and that he writes. The male we understand that when we're talking about iskashus to the Rebbe, iskashus to amitis with the lotion of the Hayim Yem is Sai mitzad us, Sai mitzad the Chosid, and Sai mitzad the Rebbe. Sai mitzad the connection from the Chosid to the Rebbe, from the Rebbe to the Chosid. It goes through the of Limud HaTorah. Sai mitzad the connection from the Chosid to the Rebbe. Where is he miyuchid? Where is he united? Where does he become one? Limud HaTorah. Moshe. And Sai mitzad the Rebbe to the Chosid. Where does the Rebbe put himself into? He puts his etzem into his Torah. And that's why the Hamshachah from Torah is a higher Hamshachah, like mentioned before, from Tanya Perek Lamed Zayin and Tanya Perek Mem Zayin. Kamuvon, like it says in Hayim Yem, B'ri'iyas ponim l'chut lo isagi. It's not enough. Of course, it has to be the in of Riyas ponim, and that is the Yesod. The Yesod is the in of Riyas ponim. The Yesod is the iskashus atzis from Achosed to the Rebbe, even before we start learning. Like it says in many places in Chassidus, where it says, Kachenu b'mitzvisecha, v'sein chelkeinu b'seidosecha. Chassidus is masbir, that what's the in of Kachenu b'mitzvisecha, v'sein chelkeinu b'seidosecha is two levels in iskashus. There's iskashus and the ifan of Kachenu b'mitzvisecha, ifan of Kiddushin. And then there's the same chelkeinu b'seidosecha, which is a ifan of nisuin, ichut pnimi. Kiddushin is pale the ichut chitzein. That's a makiv the kidding. Kiddushin. Like the Rebbe explains, Barichas nefabregin of Chof of Tovshin Yud, the Rebbe explains this, how it's in the Inyanim of Iskashus. In Iskashus, there's the Inyan of Kiddushin, Osar lo akula al mekehegdish, to go away from the entire world, to decide we're Chassidim, decide we're connected to the Rebbe, to decide that this is who we are, this is our muhus. But then comes the Sein Chelkeinu b'Seidosecha. Then comes the Ichut Pnimi. The Sein Chelkeinu b'Seidosecha, like the In of Nisuin, like the Chasana. And the In of Nisuin and the Ichut Pnimi of Achosid to the Rebbe, this is through the In of B'Seidosecha. Just like Matan Teire, it says, was pale the Nisuin of the Eibishter in Yid. Al derech zeh, and even more in general, we learn, the Rebbe always brings down from Medrash, that now we're only called like Eirosim, like a Chosn and a Kala. When Mashiach will come, it will be the of Nisuin, it will be the Ichut Pnim. And Al derech zeh biprotius, Kachenu b'mitzvisecha, a mitzvah is like Kiddushin, a mitzvah pales a makiv the connection, which is the foundation of everything. But on top of that, there has to be after the Ichut Chitzeini, has to be the Ichut Pnimi through the V'sein Chelkeinu b'Seidosecha. When we're talking about learning the Rebbe's Torah, there's different protim, a different inyonim in Limud Torah, just like there is in Limud Torah B'chlal. The first thing it's important to mention, we're holding now in Gimmel Tammuz. In Gimmel Tammuz, every single chosid is mishtateach and comes to the Eil, whether B'Geshem or Beruach, but every single chosid is connected to the Rebbe, and every single chosid, his head and his heart is in the union of Ishtadchus by the Rebbe. There's a Zayah that the Rebbe brings down Kama the Kama Peyon. That it says in the Pasuk, V'lo yoda ishes kivurosei, that nobody knows where Moshe Rabbeinu is buried. Zog the Zayar kvuroso dilei mishte. Moshe Rabbeinu is buried in his learning. You want to have Moshe Rabbeinu. You know where Moshe Rabbeinu is? Moshe Rabbeinu is in his state. That's where he's buried. That's where he is. That's where the nafshik service helps. In other words, when we learn the Torah from the Rebbe, it's not only we're learning the Torah from the Rebbe because it's a beautiful chokhmah, and it is a beautiful chokhmah. We're learning the Torah from the Rebbe, like we mentioned before, Valdo is This is where he puts himself into. The Rebbe once said by Fabregen Ameri de Kevar, Meish Rabbeinu b'Yem Nistal Kusei wrote 13 Sifrei Torah. There's a whole shaila how he was able to write 13 Sifrei Torah in the same day. But actually, why did he write 13 Sifrei Torah b'Yem Nistal Kusei? Why after that? Because Meish Rabbeinu knew this is going to be the Istalkus. And Meish Rabbeinu wanted Yidden should still be connected to him. How will they be connected to him? He gave them Sifrei Torah, and it's Torah's Meisha Avdi. So through giving each one a Sefer Torah, each Shevet, this is the way, this is where Moshe Rabbeinu put himself into, so every single Yid could connect to him through learning his Torah. In andere Werte, when there's an in, just like in Nigla the Torah, when there's the basic in of Limud Torah, which is called Lodas and Samaisa Asher Yas. I'm learning Torah because of Poshet, I have to know what to do. I have to know how to put on tefillin. I'm learning Yilchas tefillin. I have to know how to put on tzitzis. I'm learning Yilchas tzitzis. I have to know how to keep Shabbos. I'm learning Yilchas Shabbos. That is the basic level of Limud Torah. And of course, this is the elevated Limud Torah. But when the Rebbe explains in many Mamorim and Sichis, this is not the real and ultimate level of Limud Torah, because then the Torah is only an emtsoi. Then I'm learning Torah only as the middle stage to be able to know how to do the mitzvah. The real union of Limud Torah and the real union of Limud Torah Lishma is Valdo is this is where he is. When a Yid learns Torah, and it's not Negeya whether it is Negeya L'mais or not Negeya L'mais, it's connected to the Rebbe. When a Yid learns the Torah from the Rebbe, he has to know here is the etzem of the Rebbe and the Torah that he's learning. And when he's learning the Rebbe's Chochmah, and he's getting it and understanding it like Moshe, so Chochmah Savai B'Kirbei, the Rebbe is connecting, and the Rebbe himself, and the etzem from the Rebbe. The Rebbe once said an expression, and again, this Indian, it's a iskashtus etzem be'etzem, where the etzem of the Rebbe is connects to the etzem of the person. This is the real meaning. What we're saying that is kashrus so amitis al delimuteros. There is the meaning of learning the Torah from the Rebbe. You have to know the minhagim we have to do. We have to know avort of the parsha. We have to know how to be able to say a shir. We have to be able to say a vort. We sometimes have problems. We have to have hadroche, direction. This is all of das and samais asher yas. But the ikir, a person has to know that when we learn the Torah from the Rebbe, any part of the Rebbe's Torah, hot dem Rebbe. And when you have the Rebbe pale, and the Rebbe is pale beifin pnimi. There's a word from the Rebbe in Tovshin Yud. It's a meredike word, which every one of us, it can shake up every one of us. The Rebbe brings what it says in the Gemara, Teira tziva lo nu meishe mirosho kilas yankiv. The Gemara says the gematria of Torah is Tov Frish Yud Aleph. Why not Taryag? Because there's two mitzvahs of a Neichi, Hashem Olikecha V'Yelecha, that we heard with Pihagvura Shaman, we're direct from the Eibishter. So we heard from Moshe Rabbeinu only 611 mitzvahs. The other two, that we heard from Moshe Rabbeinu, that we heard from the Eibishter direct. The Rebbe says like this. What does it mean? We're talking about a Yid that only has, the Rebbe says, a Pneumistic Pirish. He only has Tov Reish Yud Aleph mitzvahs. He's missing out on a very basic mitzvah. He's missing out on Neichi Hashem Olekecha. He's missing out on Lei Elocha. A Yid that has very terrible issues in Emunah. What is the Eitzah? Teira Tziva Lo Nu Meishe. Learn the Teira of Moshe Rabbeinu. You will learn the Teira of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu will help you and pull you out from your matzah. What is the moed? The moed is the Rebbe which is in the Torah. So when I learn, and we're not talking about a Yid Baal Madrege, we're talking a Yid that has Tov Reish Yud Aleph. If he has terrible problem, he's missing out two very important mitzvahs. But Afal Pikain, he's going to learn the Rebbe's Torah. The Rebbe will pull him out. Many times the Rebbe is to be madgish. what it means, why we say the Lashon is Yafutzu Ma'inisecha Chutza. Yafutzu Ma'inisecha, that's what Mashiach told the Baal Shem Tov, Yafutzu Ma'inisecha, what's the inyan of Amayon? There's many sikhs to explain what's the inyan of Amayon Dafka, and the characters of Amayon different than any other types of water. One of the characters of Amayon is, and what determines in Halacha, what is Amayon? That Amayon is connected to the Moket. And Amayon is connected to the Moket, to the source of the water. If the water is coming out from the ground, and there is some type of a hefsek, some type of something which breaks up the water, and then the water continues, it's not called Amayon anymore. Amayon means it's connected to the Moket. Chassidus has to be learned in Ephon of Mayon. When we have the Mayon of Chassidus, and the Mayon means it's connected to the Moket. The Rebbe is in this water. The Rebbe is in this Mayon. Then the Rebbe says another character of a Mayon is that Metahir B'Kol Shehu. No matter how much there is, even Kol Shehu. When you talk about the regular water, there's a certain shear needed boim so. But when we talk about a Mayon, even a drop of a Mayon, as long as the person is covered, it's Metahir. Another character in a Mayon is Metahir B'Zeichalim, which means that a mikveh has to be all in one place. It can't be going around. A mayon is metayim even if the water is dripping all over the place. No matter where you are and where you're not. But as long as we're a mayon, and as long as we're connected to the moket, and we're learning the Torah of the Rebbe as a mayon, is a moy sheba machzir lamut. This is the connection to the Rebbe, that the Rebbe is in us, and feeding us, and sustaining us. With the Mayim Chaim, well, and like the Rebbe brings down that one of the characters of Mayim Chaim is that no matter any level of Tumeh, even the most severe chomordical levels of Tumeh, Mayim Chaim could be Metahir. And the Mayim Chaim of the Rebbe we get through the Mayim, through the Rebbe's Torah. The Mittel Rebbe brings in Kudus HaIshtatchus, and like I mentioned before, today is a day which is Mukdish for the Yin of Ishtatchus. So the Mittel Rebbe brings the Kudus HaIshtatchus Amir the Kirin. The Mittel Rebbe explains what the Alter Rebbe says in the Geras HaKedesh of Tanya about the Ashpoy from the Rebbe to his Talmidim. And the Alter Rebbe explains there's two types of Ashpoys. There's Ashpoys which come from Pnimi, especially to his Talmidim, and then there's Ashpoy from Makif. And the Mittel Rebbe explains in great length these two kinds of Ashpoys. And then the Mittel Rebbe writes like this. We're talking about the Ashpoy Pnimis of the Rebbe, and the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, this is a Ashpoy which comes to his Talmidim. But what should do someone who was not his Talmid? What should do someone who did not know the Rebbe B'chaim Chayesei? So how can he go into the category of Talmidov? How can he get this Ashpoy Pnimis from the Rebbe? And the Mittel Rebbe brings a Meredike Meis. He says, Morris has a story that one time was a Talmud, that he looked up on the Merkove, on the wagon of Rab Chia, whatever it means, it's a very high madrege, and he became blind because he was not shaykh, it was too high for him, it was be'ein arich to his level, he wasn't shaykh to that, so he became blind. So he came to his Rebbe, I think it was Rav, I don't remember now 100%, and he told him the story, he became blind. He told him, you should go to the cave of Rab Chia, and you should tell Rab Chia, Ano masnito de Marco masnino. I am learning your brises. We know that Rab Chia and Rabbi Ishia were the ones who were Mesader, the brises. Rabbeinu HaKadosh was Mesader the Mishnah, and they were Mesader the brises. Tell him that I am learning your brises. That's what he did, and he became healed. What is this title in the story? So Mittel Rebbe explains like this. Why did he get blind? Because what's the shaykhs to Rab Chia? What are you looking in such high madregas of Rab Chia? But when he told Rab Chia, "Ano masnito de Marco masnino," that I am learning your Torah. If I am learning your Torah, I have a shaykhs to you. If I am learning your Torah, I am your Talmid. And if I am your Talmid, the mail I can get from you the Ashpoy Pnimis. And this is what the Alter Rebbe says, the Loshen Ekutis Achren in the Geras HaKedesh, which many of us learn today on Gimmel Tammuz. The Alter Rebbe says, what is a Talmid? Shenasu Ivdei Havaye Al Yidei Teiro Seiva Vidos. So when we connect to the Torah from the Rebbe, we become his Talmid, even if we did not know him B'chaim Chayesei. There's a word from the Rashbatz. The Rashbatz said he never saw the Alter Rebbe. But when he learns Tanya, he sees the picture of the Alter Rebbe. He sees it, he finds it in the Tanya. Even if someone did not see the Rebbe B'chaim Chayesei, he can still be his Talmud. And the loshim that the Rebbe uses over there is he learns the Rebbe's Teire u'mishtashea be'er teirasi. He enjoys it. He's involved in it. Another very important nekuda, which what we said before, what mentioned before, B'negeya, learning the Rebbe's Teire is what the Rebbe said in a Fabregin of Tavshin Yud Aleph, and this is Negeya also to the Kufa we are now, and especially today on Gimmel Tammuz. In Tofresh Pei, the Rebbe said, in the year of the Rebbe Rashab Yistalkus, the Rebbe Rashab spoke to the Frierdiker Rebbe about the Indian of the Maimer and the Teira of Adart of Nizak. And that Maimer talks about the mile of having the Teira engraved, Chakukim in your Meyach, because then it becomes part of you. And then, even when you are not learning, still the Teira is pale on you. That's why you stand up for a Talmud Chacham, even though he's not learning present. The Frierdiker Rebbe didn't understand why is Mitamol the Rebbe Rashab talking about this Maimer Vadart of Nizakim, which is a Maimer many times the Rebbe told Bochrim and Yechidus and in letters to learn the Maimer Baal Peh. So the Frierdiker Rebbe didn't understand why is he not talking about this Maimer. After the Yistalkus, the Frierdiker Rebbe understood this was a achon for the Rebbe Rashab Yistalkus, that he should know that after the Yistalkus, the way to connect to him is through having the V'teire Chakukim B'meich. And the same thing the Rebbe said in Tovshin Yud Aleph Nafabringin, that when we have the V'teire of the Rebbe Chakukim in our mind, even if B'shas Ma'aseh we are not thinking about, and the Rebbe is madish this nekud in many letters, the mile of having the V'teire of the Rebbe Chakukim engraved in our mind is not only that I always have what to learn, even when I'm not learning, but this is part of me. And because this is part of me, this becomes who I am. And because this becomes who I am, this protects me. And in the Rebbe's Losh, which is a medical Losh, the Gemara says that the Eberster says, I made a Yitzer Hara, but also Yitzer Hara, and I created Teira Tavon, a spice, which is called the Teira. In Poga Vechom Nuvel Zeh, Moshcheyu lo Beis HaMedrash. If the Yitzer Hara comes to you, pull him to Beis HaMedrash. Whether he's a rock or he's a piece of metal, he'll platz and he will melt. The Rebbe teaches that. In Poga Vechom Nuvel Zeh, if the Yitzer Hara comes to you, Moshcheyu lo Beis HaMedrash. Take that maimer which is chokuk in your mind. Learn it. Remind yourself on it. Bring it up. This will be mevatel Yitzer Hara. So this is another additional inyan besides learning the Rebbe's Teira, to have it chokuk, to have it in our mind. Every one of us has to have divrei Teira chakuk of the Rebbe chokuk. A word on the parsha, a maimer chassidus, a letter from the Rebbe. Always something in our mind. Chokuk means engraved. Always we just can pull it out and remind ourselves about this inyan. Then, see, even if we're in a situation from Poga B'chom Nuvel, Moshcheyu lo Beis HaMedrash. The Rebbe many times mentioned that all the inyanim have to come down the pale. Today is a time, the day of Gimmel Tammuz. Every single chossid and every single person of Anash is an Ameirdik Yiseiderus. In many places, Chassidus, it brings down the posuk in Shir HaShirim. Avak shob hashvokim ubarchevis. I am searching in the streets. Ad shemotzosi es sho'av nafshi, until I find what I love. Achazti v'lo yarpenu. I'm holding it on and not letting it go. Acheivesi v'lbeis imi v'lcheder heirosi. Till I brought it to my mother's house. What did the pasuk mean? So Chassidus explains. It's going on the Ave Mesuteres that could be sometimes lost in the street. I'm looking and searching and I found the Ave Mesuteres. I was disaided by me, the Ave Mesuteres. The Ave to the Rebbe is disaided today by every single yid. But achazti v'lei yarpenu, we have to hold on to it, not let go. We have to make a keli to keep it down. What is the keli to keep it down? Is going on Teira Shebiksav and Teira Shebal Peh, like explaining great lengths of siddhis. Every single chassid today is an Ameirdik Yiseiderus. In a matziv of matzosi es she'oav onafsh, of having that Ave Mesuteres in these galus. every single one. But we have to hold on to it and make a keli to it. And the keli to this is to be machlet, every one of us. We're all learning the Rebbe's Teda, to be mechazik in learning the Rebbe's Teda, and be mesif, with a seder mesuder, whether it's the project of Likkutei Sichos, which helps out many people to learn the Rebbe's Teda, to seder mesuder, or every person lefi kol chad lefum shuri delay. But the secret is to have a seder mesuder. Because when it's with a seder, like the Rebbe mentioned many times in the letters, kevetz yad al yad. When it's with a seder, you know, every day a letter from the Rebbe. After a week, you have 7 letters from the Rebbe. After 2 weeks, you have 14 letters from the Rebbe. And after a month, 30 letters. 30 letters from the Rebbe is a mokir mayim chayim. 30 letters from the Rebbe can get you going wherever you are, wherever you're going. Every person called chalafum shuri delay to be mesif, and to be mechazik, and to strengthen a kviyas benefesh, and a kviyas bizman. And this is the base imi and the cheder harosi, which will keep our ave and our connection and our iskashus and mitzvahs to the Rebbe to be with us. It should chazisholim not go out. It should kindle and it should burn. And through that we'll have the iskashus and mitzvahs to the Rebbe, and this will make a keli for the Isgalus, a keli in each one, our heart, and a keli in the entire world, a keli for the Rebbe's Isgalus, L'mato me'asoro tfochim b'korid mamash.
Shalom Aleichem and Yasher Koyach. Thank you for this opportunity to take part in this incredible initiative, to spend the day learning the Rebbe's Teda, and especially in this section, in the importance of learning the Rebbe's Teda as a means to his kashrus, to connect to the Rebbe through his Teda. The Teda which he taught and invested his etzem, his entire being into it. And when we learn this Teda and it becomes part of us, then the Rebbe becomes part of us. The Rebbe and his Teda become one with us. A few months ago, in connection with Yud Shvat Shivim Shana, a group of Chassidim gathered together and began Project Likkutei Sichos. The goal of it was simple: to learn Likkutei Sichos properly on a weekly basis, with the goal of learning through and completing the entire Likkutei Sichos. How incredible would it be to be able to know that in every aspect of Nigla and Chassidus, Pshat, Remesh, Drus, Sod, and everything that is included in Likkutei Sichos, that we have learned it at least once, and we understand it and we know it. Project Likkutei Sichos comes with a website, projectlikutesichos.org. And the website is filled with shiurim. A person may say, it's difficult for me, I don't know how to learn so well. This website has so many shiurim for each level and for each different type of person and where they're coming from. There's a shir inside in the text of the Sikha. There's a shir be'iyun, in depth, taking either a concept from the Sikha, a topic from the Sikha, a ha'ora, a footnote in the Sikha, and delving into it deeply, spending an hour or two just on one little section of the Sikha, especially if it's a fundamental concept, whether in Nigla or in Chassidus. Shorter shiurim, summaries, 10-minute Sikha. It could be used as an intro to the Sikha, it could be used as a review of the Sikha. It could even be used if a person doesn't have time one week to learn the whole Sikha, at least he knows that he mastered the 10 minutes of the Sikha. There's a Sikha discourse and a Sikha insight, which is geared to beginners on different levels. A Dvar Torah, which you can share at your Shabbos table, or you could share on Mivtzoyim. In addition to the shiurim, both on video and on audio, there are source sheets, pianuchim for the Marim HaKaimis, to be able to learn through the Marim HaKaimis, all the ha'aris, all the footnotes, adaptations, articles, essays, and all this in various languages, obviously in Hebrew and in English, but also in Yiddish, in French, in Russian, in Italian, in Spanish, and in Portuguese. There's literally something for everybody. And if until now it was difficult to dedicate oneself to learn 2 sikhs every single week, or even 1 sikh every single week, now it is being fed to you on a silver spoon, on a silver platter. I want to suggest that if you have not yet joined this project, today is a very special day to take on a hachlata, a new resolution, especially in an area of iskashrus and of learning the Rebbe's Torah. Join this project. Take it upon yourself. Don't necessarily look at the next 7 years. Look at the next year, till Yud Shvat. Till, pick a date that works for you. And say, from today, I'm going to follow with a cycle, and I'm going to learn a sikha, 2 sikhs, or even 3 sikhs a week. There's another advantage. It's not just something that you gain, that you know the Rebbe's Torah, you're connected to the Rebbe, and you're learning something, and you're enriching your knowledge and your neshama every single week. But when the Rebbe started the Mivtza of Limud Rambam, one of the advantages of learning Rambam according to the Meir Shir was the achtas, was the unity that you have when you have so many Yidden learning the same thing together. And we have seen over the last few months an incredible sense of achtas between all those who are learning Likutei Sichos. There's a connection. We are all Yidden, we are all Chassidim of the Rebbe, and we are all focused and dedicated to this same cause and mission, to connect to the Rebbe and to learn his Torah, and to learn his Torah in a systematic, organized fashion, in a way that we understand it, and we're growing week in and week out in our understanding and in our connection. And there's a practical advantage to that. Because now, if you're learning the same thing as someone else, besides benefiting from the shiurim, there are WhatsApp groups that you could learn from. You can ask a question, you can get an answer. You meet a friend, a relative in the street at a simcha. You stop and you discuss, what are you going to talk about? The weekly sikha, a vort, a question, an answer. Lately, at certain weeks, the Rebbe's Hagoyes on the sikha were published. And you could see the Rebbe's delving into each and every detail, every word, every line is meduyik by the Rebbe. And there's a whole new understanding of the Sikha, just by seeing what the Rebbe took out, what the Rebbe put in, what the Rebbe added. And to hear people discussing this and koching zach in this is such an incredible thing to witness and to be part of. For the last few months, many of us, most of us, were locked at home, so to speak. And we found so much inspiration from the sikhs of the week, especially for those who utilize this opportunity to start learning with their children, with their parents, with their spouse. It brings an avir of limud Torah. It brings an avir of chassidishkeit. It brings an avir of iskashrus into the home. So, as we stand today, with the incredible plea to the Eibishter that we should be zeicha to be reunited with our Rebbe, begashmias, dolamata. However, in this rega cotton, as we wait for this geula, as we wait for this moment, we have this incredible opportunity that, I happen to have the schus to be part of it and give a shir. And sometimes I get to hear back from people how much it has helped them, how much it has enriched their lives, how much it has strengthened their relationships, how much it has given a chayis into their families and into their shiurim. This is something that is an incredible gift that Bashgacha Pratis began this year and was accepted and was taken upon by so many to make it something that's ungenommen and accepted. It's beyond our understanding why it happened now and why so many have joined, other than the fact that this is something that the Rebbe wants. The Rebbe wants from us always, but especially now. So I encourage you, join the project. Begin, if you can't learn 2 sichas a week, learn 1 sicha a week. At least you know that you're ba'achtus with so many others. And with the Eibishter's help, and with our tefillah to the Eibishter, is that with the schus of all of this learning, and the hiskashus, and the achtus of chsidim, this will break down the final barrier of galus, and together ba'achtus, we will go, the kema skufa, with Likutei Sichos in our hand, with the Rebbe's Teireh in our hand, the Kabel Pnei Mashiach Tzidkenu, and then we will be zeichet the Teireh Chadasha Mi'ititeitzei, may it be b'meheira v'yameinu mamish.
On this Yom HaGadol VaKadosh, this very holy and awesome day, every one of us seeks to intensify his bond, his connection, our iskashrus to the Rebbe. His iskashrus, our spiritual bond and connection to the Rebbe, is achieved in a very major way through Kiyom Hira Esav, simply following the Rebbe's instructions, doing as the Rebbe asked us to do. This becomes a vehicle, a convention, through which each and every one of us is able to deepen and nurture the iskashrus, the soul connection that we have with our Rebbe. Of all the things that the Rebbe asked of us, of all the things the Rebbe instructed us to do, there's one thing that a chassid can and must do every single day of their lives. Shabbos, Yom Tov, weekdays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippurim, Simchas Torah. There is no day of the year that is outside of this. Before Pesach, the Rebbe wanted us to be Mechalek Matzah Shmura. During weekdays, the Rebbe wanted us to put on tefillin with Yidden. And there are so many different Heiras, so many different instructions from the Rebbe that are applicable in a unique time or a specific time. There is a single Heira from the Rebbe, a single thing that he demanded of us and expected of us, that's equal in all days of the year and all days of our life. And that is Limud HaRambam, the learning of Rambam every single day. Now the truth is, the conversation ends here. As the Gemara says, Chukah Chakakti. It's of no difference to us why the Rebbe wants us to learn Rambam. It's not really, one could argue, relevant what the rationale behind it is. For us, we have to know the Rebbe asked, the Rebbe instructed. We as Chassidim have to do what the Rebbe said. However, today, on this very holy day, I want to take the opportunity to share with you Divrei Harav, the words of the Rebbe. The words of the Rebbe about Limud HaRambam, because ultimately, the truest iskashrus is when we are not only simply following instructions, but when we're able to appreciate and are able to relate to what the Rebbe wanted from us, as he explicitly told and explained on multiple occasions. Uba Hagdim, if I may, a little preface. There's a sikha from the Rebbe in Chelik Tazayin Lekutei Sichos, where the Rebbe speaks about the notion that Parshas Mishpatim, the parsha that opens with and is primarily filled with ordinances, rational mitzvahs, ideas and ideals that we can relate to and understand, it's the part of Torah which people are supposed to be able to wrap their heads around. Not chukim, not the statutes, not edus, testimonials which recall particular events, but rather chuk mishpatim. And Parshas Mishpatim follows Parshas Yisrei. And the Rebbe in that Sikha asks, l'cha'ira, ostensibly speaking, it would be most reasonable that after Matan Torah, when the Rebbeinu Shalom gave us the Torah and revealed himself to us, that the next thing would be, we would receive instructions, chukim, things that would demand subservience, notions that would require us to put our own intelligence aside and simply do as we're instructed. And yet, the parsha that follows Yisrei is specifically Mishpatim. And the Rebbe points out in nuanced detail how many of the mitzvahs of Mishpatim are only given to Bnei Yisrael at a later time. The end of Parshas Mishpatim goes back to the previous subject. Why then did HaKadosh Baruch Hu in his Torah put Mishpatim after Yisrei? And the Rebbe said that's because Yisrei, Matan Torah, represents the notion of Elyonim Yerdu L'Tachteinim. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Almighty God Kaviyachal, lowers himself into our world, revealed himself in our world. And when the Jewish people, when Bnei Yisrael stood around Har Sinai, they felt and knew the presence of the Rebbeinu Shalom in a way that actually eclipsed and totally vaporized their material existence. Elyonim Yerdu. But this has to be followed, the Rebbe said, by a process of tachtenim yalu. That not only the Eibishter brings ruchnius, the spiritual reality, into our realm, but that we are able actually to uplift our everyday existence, our pedestrian lifestyle, so that we become different, so that the world becomes different, so that reality reflects the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so the Rebbe said, mishpatim, ideas that can be understood by the human mind, things that govern everyday, ordinary human life. That's the concept of Tachtenim Yalu. As it explains in many places in Chassidus, that Kabbalah Seil, that acceptance of the yoke, is a tremendously virtuous thing. But at the same time, when a person only commits himself in a way of obedience and subservience, but he doesn't really understand or appreciate why and what he's doing, there's a part of us that remains unengaged, uninvolved, uninspired, and unexcited. But when we understand it, when it comes into our Chochmah, Bina, and Das, we get the proverbial buy-in. This becomes a part of us. It becomes important to us. We self-identify with it. Tachtenim Yalu. Azach wird a lebendige Zach. We start to live with it. It pulsates with excitement for us. It resonates to us. It's something that, if you will, inspires us. We get excited about it. On another occasion, in Tavshim Tes, in Parshas Mishpatim, the Rebbe pointed out that Parshas Yisrei is the 17th Parsha of the Torah. B'gematria Tev, good. And Torah is good. But Mishpatim is Chai, Lebedigkeit. Because the Mishpatim that we can understand and appreciate, that brings us a gewaldige Chayas, a tremendous amount of energy and vitality. And we get involved. And so, my friends, I want to take this opportunity on such an awesome, holy day to share with you the words of the Rebbe. Because the Rebbe wanted us to understand and appreciate why he instituted Limud HaRambam. And the Rebbe shared with us his innermost thoughts. The Rebbe shared with us his desire. The Rebbe explained to us what he was trying to accomplish. And he allowed us, he gave us the privilege, the schus, to be his partners. When the Rebbe first introduced Rambam, and he spoke about it over a number of times, the Rebbe made it very clear that the concept of Limud HaRambam is all about the notion of Achdus, of oneness by Yidden. In fact, the Rebbe said clearly that his desire was to unite all Yidden. He talked about his Ishtadlus. The Rebbe said he tried to unite all Yidden. And the Rebbe said that this is the best way to unite Yidden. And if I may, there's many people today who are talking about Achdus. And they talk about these proverbial concepts. They talk about oneness. The Rebbe said in that Sikha that he wasn't talking about oneness in a theoretical way, that he was giving us the practical roadmap, the actual mechanism through which we could achieve this Achdus. The Rebbe said that Limud HaTorah, that learning Torah is, as the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, it represents the notion of a yichud niflo she'ein kamayu. When there's an idea, and you learn or study that idea, you understand that idea, you become inseparable from it. It becomes your opinion. It becomes your attitude. It becomes your way of looking at things. The concept of learning something represents the most profound union that exists in this world. And the Rebbe said that since Torah is the way that Yidden have this union with the Rebbeinu Shalom, with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with Almighty God, so too, when Yidden are learning Torah together, that this brings them together because all Yidden are learning the same Torah at the same time. The Rebbe told us that this was the pathway to create the true Achdus, the true unity amongst Yidden. And the Rebbe shared with us that this was the straightforward way to be able to pave the road that led to Mashiach. And he was very, very clear about it. The Rebbe went on to say that this idea of Limud HaRambam, which is so critically important, which brings about this idea of union, of oneness, which we can understand on a spiritual plane, is actually even easy to understand in an everyday fashion. We, the Jewish people, we have so many different opinions. That's how we're created. Alter Rebbe alludes to this in the Akdama of Tanya, and we all know it to be a reality of our everyday life. And the Rebbe said, there is, of course, the idea of ein de'eseim shavis. Our attitudes, our understanding of things, our opinions, they're not equal. In fact, sometimes at loggerheads. But the Rebbe said that if our disagreements become over Torah, learning Torah, trying to understand Torah, trying to appreciate Torah, and everybody comes at it from a different perspective. And of course, then there's a heated pilpul. Then there's a discussion. And people advancing different ideas and pulling in different directions. But the Rebbe said that we know that sof, when Yidden argue over a Torah concept, over understanding of Torah, when they come to it with intellectual honesty, when they come to that idea with integrity, when they want to learn Torah be'emes, in the end, what happens is that there's a regesh shel ahava, there's a feeling of love, of togetherness, and of closeness that naturally develops. As the Rebbe said, the famous words of Chazal and the words of Zvayiv Besufa, shenasu oyevim zelazeh, that even though they seem like combatants when they're sitting in the Beis Medrash, but ultimately, this brings about the greatest togetherness, the greatest spirit of friendship and love. So the Rebbe told us, simply stated, that by us all learning the same thing together and us discussing it, that on a ruchniistic, on a spiritual level, there's a yichud nifla, there's an incredible oneness that will create and will unfold for all of us, and that it's even understood in a very literal, in a very practical way. And the Rebbe said that this is b'neisef on other shiurim. He was not coming to detract from other things, but b'neisef on all other shiurim, he was suggesting the inyan of limud harambam. And limud harambam, the Rebbe said, was something that represented the entirety of Torah, the oneness of Torah, and something that all of us could be learning together, in tandem, in unison. In fact, the Rebbe went on to say something really extraordinary, which I think is of particular importance for us today. Maybe for those who haven't been so careful about the takana of limud harambam, and even for those of us who have been careful. As we'll soon talk, there's much we can do to upgrade, to improve, to intensify, and to elevate our devotion to this particular call of the Rebbe. The Rebbe said that even before we actually start learning Rambam, the Rebbe said that the Kabbalah Ha'achlota, that the resolute acceptance that we would do this, would necessarily bring about this oneness that he spoke of. And he said that oneness would undo or be mevatel, the cause for galus, our exilic dispersion, which came through sinas chinam, through unwarranted animosity, acrimony, and hatred amongst us. And here, we'd have unwarranted love. We'd have unwarranted togetherness. We'd have avas chinam. And the Rebbe said, even before you start learning Rambam, if today on Gimmel Tammuz, every one of us promises the Rebbe that our limud harambam is going to be on a higher level, automatically already we're mevatel the sibus hagalus, and already we move forward into, hopefully, very, very soon, today, Bias HaMashiach and the Hizgalus. We should be able to see the Rebbe b'moir panim. When the Rebbe talked about this idea of limud harambam, the Rebbe also said that it's very important to emphasize that he spoke about Gimmel Prakim. And you cannot ignore the words that the Rebbe said. The Rebbe said to us that ultimately the takana that he was making focused on the idea of learning 3 prakim every single day. He said for somebody who cannot learn 3 prakim, the Rebbe used the words efsher. It's impossible. If he cannot learn 3 prakim, then there are other options. There's the option of learning 1 perek of Rambam a day. And the Rebbe noted that there is historic precedent for this. There was a time when there were 2 cycles of the weekly parsha. There was one minhag in which we finished, as we do today, the entire Torah on an annual basis, and another minhag, which was found primarily in Eretz Yisrael in the Middle Ages, or the beginning of the Middle Ages, of learning and reading the Parshas HaShavua in a manner, in a cycle that unfolded over 3 years. But the Rebbe emphasized, minhag pashut bayidin was on an annual basis. And the Rebbe made it very clear that he hoped that each and every one of us would accept upon himself with absolute commitment that we would learn Gimmel Prakim, 3 chapters of Rambam, every single day. And I know that this is daunting for many, but I just want to point out, if I may, sometimes even from personal experience, when your head's not working and you simply don't have the wherewithal to slave through 3 particularly long prakim, the legendary shliach, Rebbe Shimon Gordon, they made beautiful recordings. You can put it on as fast or slow as you want, and you can push it, make it through the prakim of Rambam. Some of you have long commutes. You're driving. Listen to the words, listen to the shir, say the words. You have to say the words of the Rambam, and you're able to learn Rambam. And there are other shiurim that are available. This is something that we can do. Let's be honest with ourselves. The Rebbe said only im I efsheri, only for somebody who cannot. The Rebbe went on a different occasion to say that somebody who can learn 3 prakim and only learns 1 perek a day, the Rebbe said that is a nechshev ke bittul teira. The Rebbe said it's like bittul teira. And he used the frame of the famous question with regard to Megillah, that it says that Mikra Megillah is Mavatal Talmud Teira. In order to fulfill the mitzvah of hearing the Megillah, you're allowed to set aside the study of Torah. In fact, you're required to. And the famous shaila is, isn't the Megillah itself Torah? It's the Ksuvim. It's actual scripture. So if you're reading Ksuvim, that is Limudat Torah. And the answer that Rebbe said is that if a person could learn Torah in a very, very deep and profound way, but instead he settles for just an easy read, then that's called bittul Torah. If not quantitatively, qualitatively. And the Rebbe indicated that the same was true about Gimmel Prakim. He said that if we are able to learn, and most of us are able to learn Gimmel Prakim, and if we're not chas v'shalom, it's a yin of bittul Torah. It's a serious business. These are the Rebbe's words to us. This is the Rebbe's instruction to us. The Rebbe also, on a different occasion, on Parshas Boy and Tavshim Tes, the Rebbe said that with regard to the ishtatfus, to the commitment to Limud HaRambam, the Rebbe said it's a minig shemispashat, to learn Gimmel Prakim, 3 chapters of Rambam every single day. And the Rebbe said, obviously, it's b'li neder. However, it's b'hachlota takifa. It's with a very powerful resolve. And the Rebbe said that when there is powerful resolve, bevadai tovi lidei pel mamish. There's no question that that powerful resolve unfolds in real time and that we actually do it. And the Rebbe said that this is the notion of being rogil b'limud harambam. Rogil means it becomes second nature. It becomes who you are. And the Rebbe alluded to a lashon harambam of harogil b'tfilin, a person who is accustomed to wearing tefillin. It becomes accustomed. Shleisha prakim Rambam has to become something we are accustomed to. It's who we are. And those who are be'emes, those who are truly unable to learn Gimmel Prakim, people who didn't have a chance to learn in a yeshiva, people who came to Yiddishkeit at a later time in their life, young boys who aren't capable, it's impossible to make such a demand of them. For them, the Rebbe said that 1 perek would suffice. But it's very important to emphasize that the Rebbe expected the vast majority of Chassidim to learn 3 prakim of Rambam every day. When they were preparing the Hayom Yom, which in the preface of the Hayom Yom, it goes through the years, the different things that the Rebbe instituted. So they wrote, in Tavshim Mem Daled, they wrote Lehishtadel Lilmeid Gimmel Prakim. To try, that everybody should try to learn 3 chapters of Rambam. And the Rebbe put a line through the word Lehishtadel, leaving it as it's printed today, Lilmeid Gimmel Prakim B'chol Yom, to learn 3 chapters of Rambam each and every single day. This notion of Limud HaRambam, this notion of learning Rambam, 3 prakim, obviously, the Rebbe said, would mean that the learning was somewhat superficial. And therefore, from the very beginning, and the Rebbe emphasized this multiple times later, that we should make an effort to learn at least 1 halacha or at least 1 inyan b'iyun, because Torah requires not only covering ground, but also having a deeper appreciation. A serious limud, a learning which is profound and erudite, which is insightful, in which a person really is able to appreciate the nuances the finer points, the deeper messages that might lie in the folds of the Rambam. And so the Rebbe said that we have to make an effort, each and every one of us, to learn some of the shir of the Rambam. The Rebbe said halacha and inyan, something with greater iyun, with a greater sense of focus, and a greater sense of delving into it. But 3 Prakim Rambam is 3 Prakim Rambam. This is the Rebbe's takana. This is the Rebbe's instruction. None of us are free from it. And through it, we become makusher to the Rebbe. The truth is, most Chassidim are learning Rambam, Baruch Hashem. And this, we know, brought the Rebbe great nachas, as he spoke about it multiple times. The question becomes on a day like Gimmel Tammuz, how do we enhance, how do we elevate, how do we uplift our learning of Rambam? And here are a few suggestions, again lifted directly from the Rebbe's words. The Rebbe mentioned the Tashum Emtes, that Benigeh to Limud Rambam, Ma Teiv Manoyim, that it would be in a manner of Sheves Achim Gam Yochad, that it would be a shir, that would be learning which is done in a public fashion. The Rebbe spoke about the idea of a chavrusa, and the Rebbe went on to speak even more so about the concept of possibly setting up a shir, that should be multiple Yidden that are sitting together and learning the Gimmel Prakim Rambam B'chol Yom. And this is something that even if you're learning Gimmel Prakim, something that all of us can improve on, something we could do maybe to start a shir Rambam, to make a chavrusa with somebody in a shir Rambam. Unfortunately, over the last few months, we've become accustomed to not seeing other people. We learned how to get along on Zoom and other methodologies. So maybe it means setting up a kviyas on Zoom with somebody else, or with a number of people. But the Rebbe was very clear to say that there was a maila, a tremendous virtue, and there was tremendous value to the idea of not only learning Rambam yourself, but making a point of learning together with others. In Toshim and Vav, on Erev Yom Kippurim, the Rebbe spoke about the inyan of Leben mit der Zeit, that we, as Chassidim, were instructed to live with the Torah we learn, not only cerebrally, but also emotionally, that it becomes the fabric from which our life is woven and sewn. And the Rebbe said that the same is true about Rambam. The Rebbe said that by now, it's an inyan of Hanhoga Teva, Shanahagti Shalish Pa'amim, which is the syntax of the verbiage we use in Hataras Nadarim Erev Rosh Hashanah. And the Rebbe said by now already has a takeif of Minig Yisrael. It's already Tafshim and Vav, 1986. 3 years of learning Rambam have gone by already. The Rebbe said it has the takeif. It already has the full force of what's called a Minig by Yidden. And the Rebbe said that now we have to emphasize that not only this is a thing that Yidden do, it's a thing that we do. I do, you do. That this is Kav Shaloi, that this becomes our thing. And the Rebbe said, es a verstandig, a wie weit man darf leben mit dem. You meet somebody, a chassid, a fellow chassid. What should the conversation revolve around, if not today's Rambam? How did you understand this? Did you notice the detail, the nuance in this halacha? V'chuli, and so on and so forth. The notion of leben mit dem, to live with it, to be involved, to be engaged, to be committed, to allow it to uplift us, to allow a learning of Rambam literally to change us as it becomes the things that we're focused on. The Rebbe, on more than one occasion, emphasized that ideally the Shir Rambam should be learned during the day, before Shkia, the Rebbe said. It's true, the Rebbe noted, that karbanos that were not burnt on the Mizbeach are allowed to be burnt on the night that follows. But the Rebbe said that's only b'di'evet. It's only if we didn't have an opportunity to burn those karbanos during the day. Hektar chalavim ve'varim is not lechatchila. The notion of putting off Rambam till the evening or to the night, besides the fact that you end up sleeping on the Rambam instead of learning it, but the notion that we're doing it, it shows that it's of secondary importance. It's not a primary thing for us. It's not something that's front, right, and center. And ultimately, the Rebbe asked that we make an effort to learn the Rambam lechatchila during the daylight hours, before Shkia, saying that learning Rambam later till Chatzos, or even till Aleis HaShachar, was only the idea of Tashlumin. It was a second best, but not really the focus, not most ideal. I want to finish by talking about the idea of the Siyum of Rambam. From the very beginning, the Rebbe spoke about the importance of a Siyum. In fact, when the Rebbe himself identified the day in which Limud HaRambam would begin, which was on Yom HaRishon, what's called on Last Sunday, Chof Zayin Nisan, a day which has come to mean much to us. That was the first day of Limud HaRambam. The Rebbe said that the Haschola of Limud HaRambam, the day was chosen because it would allow for the Siyum HaRambam to be close to the birthday of the Rambam, which is Erev Yom Tov. And the Rebbe said, obviously Erev Pesach is a time of tremendous tirda. Our days are very full. Nobody really has time to get together and have a Siyum HaRambam and Erev Pesach. And therefore, the Rebbe said, it will be appropriate that the Siyum would be in Yomin Zakoyin, in meritorious and virtuous days that are besmichos, that are very close to the Yom Huledes, to the birthday of the Rambam. And in fact, Magzer HaRishon, the first Siyum HaRambam, was on Yom HaBohir, Yom HaGadol VaHaKodesh, Yud Aleph Nisan, the day of the Rebbe's birthday. And the Rebbe himself, of course, made that first Siyum HaRambam on Yud Aleph Nisan. On Yud Aleph Nisan of that year, Tavshim Mem Hey, the Rebbe said by the Farbrengen that really one needs to search no further than a reason for the Farbrengen, because it's the Siyum HaRambam. And the Rebbe spoke about the importance of a Siyum, and we are now just 2 weeks or so before the Siyum HaRambam, and it's appropriate for every one of us to think long and hard during the course of today and the following days. What will we do, despite the challenges we face today? What will we do to make sure that Shavasa B'Tammuz, if Chas v'Shalom Mashiach is not here yet, and it is not yet the Yom Tov it was promised to be, what will we do to make a Siyum HaRambam? And Achrish Pesach, Tavshim Mem Hey, so my Zaydel of Hashalom, Avram Hecht, would come from where he lived in Flatbush. He would always come for Kishul Bracha. And on that night when he came for Kishul Bracha, the Rebbe gave him a big smile. And the Rebbe said to him, Vergesnit, don't forget, the Rebbe said, tomorrow is the Siyum HaRambam HaGadol of Rebbeinu Moshe ben Maimon HaSfardi. My Zayda was a Rav in a Sfardish shul. And the Rebbe said with a big smile, don't forget, tomorrow is the Siyum. My friends, let us not forget, the Siyum HaRambam was important to the Rebbe. In fact, on one occasion, the Rebbe suggested, and went on further, not even just to suggest, but to state it clearly, that the inyan of the Siyum HaRambam was directly linked to the Etzem HaLimud, and he said that the Siyum HaRambam, on the day, or besmichas, to Yom Huledes of the Rambam, is connected to Limud HaRambam itself. I'm going to share with you the exact words of the Rebbe as they're transcribed. Anoichi, the Rebbe said, the word Anoichi, that's of course the word that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that Almighty God used to introduce himself to each and every one of us when we stood around Har Sinai. Anoichi, Rosh Tevis, it's an abbreviation for the words Ano, Nafshi, Ksavis Yehovis. I have written or placed my soul in this document and given it to you. Hainu, the Rebbe said, that is to say, Sha'akadosh Baruch Hu hichnis es atzme kaviyachol, that the Eibishter kaviyachol, as if to say, anthropomorphically speaking, placed himself in the Torah, gave himself to us through his Torah. And therefore, through limud HaTorah, we say, Oisi atem leichim. When you're grasping Torah, when you're learning an idea in Torah, you're grasping, you're learning, you're taking the Eibishter himself. And the Rebbe said, Mikivon she tzadikim deiman lebeiron, because, as Chazal teach us, tzadikim are a reflection of their Creator. It's understood that the same ideal applies also to the manuscripts, the writings, the Sfarim of the Rambam. That he placed himself, hichnis es nafshe, he put his very essence into the Sefer. And the Rebbe said that through the limud of Rambam, we are misached, we become one with atzmos HaRambam, with the essence of the Rambam. Not only the Rambam's intelligence, not only the Rambam's teaching, but ultimately the essence of the Rambam. And therefore the Rebbe said, there's a hadgasha, there's an emphasis, there's a maila, there's a virtue that is unique and special. Kasher Mesayimim Limud HaRambam, when we finish the learning of Rambam, besmichas, close to the Rambam's Yom Huledes. My brothers and sisters, think about these words. The Rebbe said that when the Siyum HaRambam is on that specific day, it connects us to the atzmios, to the essence. And the first Siyum HaRambam was on Yud Aleph Nisan, on the day that the Rebbe was given to us, on Yom Huledes of the Rebbe. That was the first machzer. We're now completing the 39th machzer. On Shavasa B'Tammuz, Yahafech, L'Sasan L'Simcha, we Emertz Hashem begin the 40th machzer, the 40th cycle of Limud HaRambam and Sefer HaMitzvahs. The Limud HaRambam and Sefer HaMitzvahs, and I really should interject and point out that the Rebbe very strongly emphasized that he wanted women and children to participate in this mitzvah also. And he said that was part of the Achdus. The Rebbe expected that the woman would learn Sefer HaMitzvahs. Not just an idea from Sefer HaMitzvahs, they would actually learn Sefer HaMitzvahs. They would actually learn from the Sefer. That children, the same way they learn Mishnayos or Gemara in school, the same way they're reading Psukim, that the children would actually learn the Sefer HaMitzvahs. And the Rebbe redivided Sefer HaMitzvahs in a unique way. The Rebbe divided it himself. The Rebbe apportioned the days of Sefer HaMitzvahs. The Rebbe is the one who apportioned the Rambam, so that Sefer HaMitzvahs would be studied in perfect symmetry and corollary to Shleisha Parakim. The Sefer HaMitzvahs, even Perek Echad is concluding now a cycle, and we're starting the 40th machzer. And it starts on Shavasa B'Tammuz, a day that we're promised is going to be a day of Simcha, Emertz Hashem. When Mashiach will come, as the Rebbe's Medayik at the end of Hilchos Tainus, it's not only going to be a time when there's no longer sadness. It's not only going to be a day in which there's no longer a sense of mourning that pervades it. It will be a hafech. The day will be transformed, sublimated, turned into a day of tremendous simcha. That's the day that we start learning the 40th machzer. Reb David Duva recently publicized this idea, that the idea of koyim minish adaita derabba. Adaita derabba is the in of das. Das, or knowledge, as the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, is inyan iskashlos. It means the idea of being bound, connected. The 40th cycle of Rambam, the Limud HaRambam that we perform every single day of our lives that connects us to the Atzmius of the Rebbe. And now we begin the 40th cycle. And the 40th cycle, my friends, concludes on Yom Hilul Rabbah, on Gimmel Tammuz next year. Surely if we use this day of Gimmel Tammuz, and we promise the Rebbe that it's going to be different in this 40th cycle, starting from today, that our Limud HaRambam is going to be something we take seriously, that it becomes something that we're accustomed to. It becomes part of our nature, part of our life. It's not even a question. A day will never go by, should never go by, chas v'shalom, in which we didn't learn the Shir Rambam. And we rededicate ourselves that way as we go into the idea of our Boyim Shana, the idea of the 40th cycle, which is connected to Das to Hiskashros, that surely will be Zeicha Emertz Hashem, that the Rebbe himself will make the Siyum HaRambam together with the Rambam in the third Beis HaMikdash, B'mheira will be Amenu, Amen.
Der Aloch achreina hebt so schon, und beise hazman, wo das kommt behemschig zu der Friedeke Aloche, als zu des Mann, wo das Yemes HaMashiach, le Yiyeh Shom, le Rov, le Milchome, nicht kein Hunger und nicht kein Milchomes, le Kina v'Sachlus wird nicht sein kein Kina und Strachlus zwischen sich. Und sagt auf der Ufeche Tatam, שהטבע מתעשין בתחילוסה, das הנוסח von הטעם, ודפר was die טבע was sie dämmelt sein. wird sein מושפע הרבה, wird sein הסך טבע, in die Tobe Pashtus kein Siebe, soll sein Kina, Allahs kama וכמה, sie kann nicht sein kein Roh, wie bald am Hot טבע הרבה,
L'chaim, l'chaim. I would like to share with you a project of the Rebbe related to the Rambam, to the Shir Rambam, to the learning of the Rambam. I hope this will encourage myself and everybody to strengthen themselves in the learning of the Rambam, in the learning of the Shiurim of the Rambam. In 1984, this is in Tovshin Daled Mem, Achar Shel Pesach, the Rebbe started the takana of learning a daily Rambam, Shir Rambam. From what I remember, the actual Shir began on Chof Zayin Nisan Tovshin Daled Mem. A few months later, it was Chamisha Osir Be'ov. There was a Fabrengen. And during that Fabrengen, the Rebbe said that he wants that there should be a group of Jungelite of the Koilel, who should devote themselves to a project in which the sources of the halachas of the Rambam will be compiled and published. As it's known, the Rambam wrote his halachas in Sefer Mishnah Torah without giving the sources, because he wanted it to be able to be learned by everybody, kakotin, kagodel, great and small. Everybody should be able to learn it straight, the halachas, the laws of the Rambam, in a clear, concise way. The Rebbe actually explained during the course of this project that the Rambam himself writes that he actually, if you can say, regrets that he did not write the sources for his halachas, and he would like to compile the sources of his halachas, because he himself saw the need for having the sources of the halachas recorded. Someone asked him, the Rambam writes in one of his letters, the source of halacha, and he gave the source, realized afterwards that that was not the place, and afterwards found the right source where he took it from, and therefore the Rambam himself writes that it was his intention to compile this kind of a chibur. So the Rebbe said that by those that are now compiling what's now known as the Mare Mekemis of the Rambam is actually fulfilling the will of the wish of the Rambam. The following day, I had the merit to be learning in the koilel of the Maskiris at the time. Rabbi Heller came in and he said that the Rebbe wants to know which Jungelite are ready to devote themselves to this project. So there was a number of us that gave in their names. I gave him my name as well. And we started working, actually the entire koilel started working on compiling the sources, collecting the sources for the Rambam. We were given guidance how to do it, and we got svarim that bring the sources of the Rambam, because this is actually something that's been dealt with since the Rambam's work was written till today. This is what the scholars, what the mefarshim, what the chachamim were always involved with. One of the main things was to find and explain what's the source of the Rambam. So we started working. Now remember, we concentrated first of all on the Hakdama, which has all the generations and all the names, and we worked quite extensively on it to find the source for every detail. Remember, we used the Geras Rab Shiri Regoyen and various sources to try to find sources for every detail. And from time to time, we would have to send into the Rebbe what we did. The Rebbe, in the course of this time, Fabringed a few times, and the Rebbe had said that we should not spend so much time now to going and searching for every detail, but rather to gather and collect that which is more readily available, those sources that are more readily available, and put and in a more speedy way to complete the sources, gathering together the sources for the Rambam, for the entire Rambam. So at a certain point, this is all that we're discussing now is in the course. We're talking about a span of 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks. We started working in a manner where we had a plan that every kollel young man takes a few prakim. We will be able to do it on the level of about 60 prakim a day, 50, 60 prakim a day. And the Rambam has 1,000 prakim. So the plan was that in the course of a few weeks we'll be able to manage to finish compiling the Mar Mekaymis for the Rambam. At least the first version. Again, the Rebbe would ask, we would have to give in to the Rebbe what we did. I remember the Empire Press, especially with the effort of Remotel Chain, Olav Hasholem, big schus for him. He worked very, very hard with the whole staff. They worked very hard because things were not as sophisticated as they are now. Everything would have to go to the printer, then you had to come back on gailies, and we have to edit and then send it back, and do a few times back and forth till the product was a complete, corrected product. This is a day before Erev Rosh Chodesh El. We're talking about 2 weeks since the start of this project, probably a little bit less. Chof Ches Menachemov. The Rebbe asked what's going on, and we reported to the Rebbe what we were doing, and the Rebbe answered that apparently Kanire Choser Behazrizus Al Koponim B'Mahadrin Min HaMahadrin. Apparently there is lacking in the alacrity, in the zrizus, at least on the level of Mahadrin Min HaMahadrin. Bozer. And the Rebbe wrote, "V'ayin igeres hakodesh ladmur hazoken, shekidai gam zeh b'kayetze b'zeh." That in regards to such a matter, to the zrizus is very important. Even such a level of mahadrin and mahadrin. I believe the Rebbe is referring to what it says in the Igeres HaKodesh, that the schus that stands us in good stead till today is from the Akedah, that Avram brought Yitzchak to the Akedah. The great merit is especially because of the zrizus, the extraordinary alacrity with which Avram Avinu went ahead to do what the Eibishter wants. So we saw that the Rebbe wants things done even more quickly than we're doing it. So if I remember, this is the day before Erev Rosh Chodesh Elul. We went into the lunchroom of 1414, there was Bachrim there, and we told them that we need their help. We want to be able to complete all this, the sources for the Rambam in such a way that we should be able to complete it by tomorrow morning or like early afternoon, before the Rebbe goes to the oil. They would go Erev Rosh Chodesh to the oil. We wanted to be able to tell the Rebbe that we completed it. So we got, the Kelly and a lot of Bachrim. We gave them each instructions how to do it. We gave them the material from which to compile the sources. Everybody was assigned a certain amount that he was supposed to do, and we were working very hard. And the following day, we were able to tell the Rebbe, Erev Rosh Chodesh, before the Rebbe went to the oil, that we completed putting together the sources, at least the first version of the sources for the entire Rambam. And then there's the whole process of it going to the printer and then bringing it back and editing and correcting. By the time Chai Elul came, about 2 weeks later, Chai Elul was on Shabbos, before Shabbos, the Rebbe had already a bound Sefer Mara Mekaymis of the Rambam, a thick book on the entire Rambam. The Rebbe spoke about it on Shabbos by the Farbrengen, and he said that they were being prompted to do things very quickly and to rely just on, one hagoed, that it should be checked over at least once, and with the reliance that then there's going to be another version where it will be, gone over again and more thoroughly, and we'll get even a better and a corrected version. But for the benefit of the learning of the Rambam, to be able to learn the Rambam and looking up the sources and to learn it in a thorough way, it was done in such a speedy way. And the Rebbe then said that those that worked on it, and the Vechom, Rabbi Heller went up, and a few of us also went up, and the Rebbe gave us l'chaim. After that, Farbrengen, after Shabbos, an instruction came from the Rebbe that we should gather a lot of bochim. And they should go over every source in the Sefer Mishnah Torah, checking out every source, and making a lu chatikun, corrections on whatever has to be corrected. And in addition to that, there was meanwhile new sources that were being found for halachas that we hadn't included before. Again, a lot of work went into it. And before Rosh Hashanah, we already had a supplement known as the Miluim for the Mara Mekaymis, with a big Luach Hatikon, many corrections, and also many new sources in addition to the Sefer Mara Mekaymis. Afterwards came an instruction. Now we have Rosh Hashanah, Tishrei. Came an instruction from the Rebbe that we should now make a new, updated version of the Mara Mekaymis of the Rambam, including all the corrections and all the additions. Again, we worked very hard, and meanwhile, we also asked that those that have sources that they found, Rosh Yeshivas, Rabbanim, the Rebbe himself sent the Sefer Mara Mekaymis to different Gedolei Yisrael. We got then a lot of Mara Mekaymis, a lot of sources from the Pnei Menachem, who was then the Gerer Rosh Hashiva, and later on became the Gerer Rebbe. And he sent a very warm letter to the Rebbe, and he sent many sources, which the Rebbe in turn sent to us that we should, we should include those sources, we should go over everything that he sent. And the Rebbe shows that a tremendous interest in this whole project. The Rebbe himself also gave sources for the Sefer. And usually wherever the Rebbe gave sources, it says that it's from the Rebbe. We worked very hard. By the time Yutas Kislev came, we had a new, updated, beautiful book, updated, which is much better than the original one. Also, Mara Mekaymis, a thick book with many sources for the entire Rambam. Fast forward a little bit. The Rebbe, once the Rebbe started the shir, the whole shir of learning Rambam, the Rebbe would very often speak about this daily shir and connected with lessons in Avodas Hashem, and the Rebbe would sometimes go in depth into one of the halachas of the Rambam that was being learned on that day. Came Chof Teves. Chof Teves is the Yom HaYilula of the Rambam. And there was a Farbrengen. It was a very special, very interesting Farbrengen. It's recorded. And the Rebbe spoke on the shir of the Rambam of that day, and it was in Hilchis Reitzeach. It's in Sefer Nezikin. I believe it's Perek Zayin, and there's a halacha there. Talmid shegolo maglin rabbi imoy. That if a student, if a Talmid needed to go be exiled to the Ori Miklat, then the din is that his teacher, his Rebbe, has to go to exile with him, because the pasuk says that he should go there v'chai, and he should live. And in order that he should be able to live, he needs his teacher to be there with him to learn Torah with him. It's a Gemara in Makis. So the Rebbe says that if you look for the source for this halacha, and you look in the Sefer, the Mara Mekaymus, which compiles the halachas, they bring the source in the Gemara Makis, which is correct. However, there's a whole other part in that halacha that the Rambam says, and it's a whole inyan in Musar, in ethics. The Rambam writes that chaye balei hachachma umvaksheho, that those that are learning, intellectual people, that seek knowledge, that seek chachma, beloy Torah, if they don't have Torah, kemisayin chashuvin, it's like death. It's like not having life. And that's why it's important to have the teacher come. The Rebbe says that in this Sefer of Mara Mekaymes, there is no source given for this idea that the life of those that seek knowledge, those that learn chachma, without Torah is like lack of life. And the Rebbe says that there is a Sefer that does give the source for it. And I believe the Rebbe says that they use that Sefer. From what I remember, it was the Rambam La'am. And the Rebbe says, and it is the correct source. The source is, it's a pasuk which says, "HaChachma techaye ba'aleho," that chachma, wisdom, gives life to its master. And therefore the Rebbe said that this shows that even in this Sefer, where there was so much work done, the Rebbe called it a malocha ha'chi g'deila v'ha'chi chashuva. Even though such a great work was done, it shows shgias miyam, there's still mistakes, there's still room for corrections, and therefore we should continue to work on finding more sources and making up for anything that needs to be corrected or missed out, so that by the time the Yom Uledes of the Rambam comes, we will have many editions of Mara Mekaymes, which is Yud, Daled, Nisan. And we worked very hard, and by that time we had a supplement Sefer of Miluim, of additional sources of the Rambam. And from then on, from time to time, there was more sources that were found, and there was more supplements, and eventually all the supplements were put together into one big, also thick Sefer that had many sources. So if you have these two Sfarim together, you actually have a very, very nice collection of the sources for the Rambam. I hope that what I shared with you will encourage everybody, because the Rebbe said different reasons for the purpose of these Mara Mekaymes. The Rebbe says that you can even paskin from the Rambam. Also, you can then learn more in depth the halachas of the Rambam. The Rebbe showed tremendous interest in this. The Rebbe himself, whenever these supplements would come out, the Rebbe would go over them. Sometimes there would be additions from the Rebbe to them. I hope that this will strengthen myself and everybody else in their learning of the Rambam, in learning in depth, and we should merit through this Bekorev Mamish, like it says in the end of the Rambam, Umola ha'oretz deas Hashem ka'yimayim l'yom chasim, with the coming of Mashiach, Bekorev Mamish, l'chaim.